Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakened power of the Holy Sword Durandal and got married with Xenovia Quarta? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Blade and the Beast. The rain was a curse. It fell in cold, relentless sheets, turning the forest floor of the land of fire into a churning sea of mud and misery. Each drop that struck Naruto Uzumaki's face felt like a tiny needle. A persistent, chilling reminder of their grim situation. He wiped a smear of grime and water from his cheek, his knuckles raw, his gaze fixed on the churning chaos ahead. This was supposed to have been a simple escort mission. A milk run, as Captain Yamato had called it before handing the scroll to Kakashi. Protect a minor merchant envoy, deliver him to a town on the border, collect the fee. Simple. Instead, it had become a slaughter. The forest was on fire, the unnatural, acrid scent of chemical flames mingling with the smell of wet earth and blood. Trees that had stood for centuries were now skeletal torches, their burning limbs casting a hellish, flickering glow on the carnage below. The ambush had been brutally efficient. At least 20 Iowa shinobi, their faces hidden behind grim porcelain masks, had descended upon them without a sound, their jutsu ripping the earth apart. The merchant and his guards hadn't stood a chance. Naruto, on your left. Kakashi's voice cut through the downpour, sharp and urgent. Naruto didn't need the warning. He was already moving, his body a blur of orange and black as he spun, a kunai flashing in his hand. He deflected a volley of stone shuriken that would have turned him into pulp, the impact jarring his arm to the shoulder. He landed in a low crouch, the mud sucking at his sandals. An Iowa ninja surged from the shadows, a thick chakra blade humming in his hand. Naruto met the attack with a Rasengan, the spiraling sphere of blue energy tearing through the enemy's defense and sending him flying into the burning husk of a tree. There was no time for relief. Two more took his place. Sakura. Status. Kakashi's voice barked again. He was a silver phantom amidst the chaos, his Sharingan a crimson pin. Point of focus as he weaved through enemies, his movements a deadly dance of misdirection and lightning-fast strikes. Sai is down. His ink beasts are dissolving. Sakura's reply was strained. I'm trying to get to him. But they've pinned me down. Naruto risked a glance. Sakura was crouched behind an uprooted tree, green chakra glowing around her hands as she deflected a torrent of earth and spikes. Not far from her, Sai lay in the mud, his chest rising in shallow, pained breaths. He'd been hit by a wide-area paralysis jutsu early in the fight while trying to provide air support. They were being systematically dismantled. This wasn't a typical ambush. These Iowa shinobi were too coordinated, too ruthless, and they were using techniques he'd never seen before. One of them, a towering figure in heavier armor who seemed to be their commander, was chanting in a low, guttural language. The air grew thick, heavy with an energy that felt wrong, a greasy, foul presence that made the Kyuubi stir restlessly in his gut. A massive, intricate seal began to glow on the ground around the commander, its lines pulsing with a sickly purple light. He's using a forbidden jutsu. Kakashi yelled, dispatch, an opponent with a Reikiri that hissed in the rain. Stop him. Naruto created two shadow clones without a second thought. They shot forward, Rasengans blazing, while he provided cover with a barrage of kunai. But the Iowa shinobi were prepared. A wall of solid rock erupted from the mud, blocking the clones' path. The moment they struck it, the wall dissolved into a swampy mire, trapping them. Before they could disperse, chains shot from the seal on the ground, wrapping around the clones and draining their chakra until they burst into smoke. The feedback hit Naruto like a physical blow, staggering him. The commander's chanting reached a crescendo. Oh, dwellers in the lightless cracks, he roared, his voice distorted by his mask, your master calls. Feast on the life of this world. The seal flared, and reality seemed to tear open. It wasn't a clean rip, but a festering, jagged wound in space. From this nauseating tear crawled things that had no place in the world of the living. They were vaguely humanoid, with too many joints in their limbs and skin the color of bruised flesh. Their faces were blank plains of skin, save for gaping maws filled with needle-like teeth. Demons. Kakashi had told him stories of such things. Ancient legends of forbidden arts that brushed against other, darker worlds. He'd never believed them. The demons lunged forward, their movements jerky and unnatural. They ignored the Iowa shinobi, their eyeless faces all turning towards Naruto and his team. They could sense the vibrant life force, Naruto's most of all. "What the hell are those things?" Sakura shouted, her voice laced with a fear he had rarely heard from her. "Stay back. Don't let them touch you," Kakashi ordered, his tone stripped of its usual calm. He knew what these were. He knew they were in over their heads. The battle devolved into a desperate struggle for survival. The demons were fast, strong, and their claws dripped with a black ichor that sizzled when it touched the ground. Naruto fought with a frantic energy. His taijutsu a whirlwind of kicks and punches, but for every one he smashed apart, 2 more seemed to crawl from the tier. He felt their foul energy clawing at his senses. A stark contrast to the clean feel of natural chakra. The Kyuubi was roaring in his mind, a torrent of rage and hatred directed at these abominations. Filth, unclean, tear them, rip them, burn them. One of the creatures scuttled past his guard, its claws aimed at Sakura, who was desperately trying to drag an unconscious Sai to safety. "Sakura!" Naruto yelled, his heart seizing in his chest. He moved faster than he thought possible, pushing his body to its absolute limit. He threw himself in front of her, forming a Rasengan in a split second. The demon's claws raked across his back, a searing, white-hot pain that stole his breath, but his attack hit home. The Rasengan blew the creature to pieces, splattering its black blood across the mud. Naruto fell to one knee, gasping, the pain in his back a raging fire. The demonic ichor was burning through his flak jacket, eating at his flesh. The Kyuubi's chakra surged, trying to heal the wound, but the foul energy of the demon fought back, resisting the healing process. It was a poison unlike any other. He looked up, his vision swimming. The Iowa commander was laughing, a horrible, grating sound. "The vessel of the Kyuubi," he sneered. "Your life force is magnificent. They will feast on you for days." Kakashi was locked in combat with 3 of the masked ninja, unable to break away. Sakura was trying to heal him, her hands glowing with green light. But tears of frustration streamed down her face as the wound refused to close. The demonic poison was too strong. Naruto grit his teeth, forcing himself to his feet. More of the creatures were closing in, their maws dripping. He saw the genuine terror in Sakura's eyes, the grim determination on Kakashi's face, the absolute hopelessness of their situation. They were going to die here. All of his training, all of his promises to get stronger, to protect his friends, it was all going to end in this muddy, rain-drenched hell. A different kind of rage began to build within him. It wasn't the Kyuubi's hot, destructive fury. This was cold. It was a deep, soul-shaking anger born of helplessness. It was the fury of a boy who had been alone his whole life, who had finally found a family, and was now watching it being torn away from him. No, the word was not spoken. It was a feeling, a tremor that started in the very core of his being. "I won't let you." The Kyuubi's chakra, which had been fighting the poison, suddenly recoiled, as if in deference to a greater power awakening within him. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain and the chittering of the demons. Then came the light. It wasn't the sun. It was a pure, brilliant, golden radiance that erupted from Naruto's body. It was not chakra. It was something else entirely, something ancient and holy and utterly absolute. The light slammed outward in a shockwave, vaporizing the rain around him, and the demons shrieked, shielding their featureless faces as if staring into the heart of a star. The Iowa ninja cried out, their eyes burning. Even Kakashi and Sakura were thrown back, blinded by the sheer intensity of the light. The pain in Naruto's back vanished, the demonic poison incinerated by the golden fire. He felt empty, and then, he felt full. A warmth spread through his veins, a sense of rightness, of purpose, that he had never known. An immense power, clean and sharp as forged steel, surged through him. In his mind, he heard a faint, melodic hum, like a choir of distant voices singing a single, perfect note. His right hand felt heavy. He looked down. Clutched in his fist was a sword. It was a magnificent weapon. A European-style broadsword that seemed to suck in the light and radiate it back tenfold. The crossed guard was ornate, golden and fashioned like stylized angel wings. The high, LT was wrapped in pristine white leather, and a sapphire of impossible depth was set into the pommel. The blade itself was long, double-edged, and shimmered with a light of its own, etched with elegant, glowing runes that he couldn't read but somehow understood. They spoke of justice, of destruction, of protection. He didn't know the name of the sword, but the sword knew him. It felt like an extension of his own arm. A missing piece of his soul he never knew was gone. He felt its will, a righteous, burning desire to purge the filth that had invaded their world. The Iowa commander stared, his arrogance replaced by disbelief and fear. What is that? No Jinchuriki can wield such. Naruto didn't hear him. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki. He was the wielder. He moved, the sword leading the way. He wasn't consciously thinking about his actions, his body simply knew what to do. The blade hummed, and he swung it in a wide, horizontal arc. A wave of golden fire erupted from the sword, 20 feet high, and washed over the battlefield. It didn't burn the trees or the mud. It passed through them, but when it touched the demons, they erupted into motes of golden dust, their dying SC. Reams silenced before they could even begin. In seconds, a dozen of the creatures were simply gone, purged from existence. Naruto flowed forward, a dance of impossible grace. He was no longer the clumsy, headstrong brawler. He was a swordsman, a master. Each step was perfect, each swing precise. He met a demon's lunge with a simple parry, the holy steel of his blade turning the creature's claws to ash on contact. He spun, the sword a blur of light, and bisected 3 more in a single, fluid motion. They didn't bleed. They dissolved into light. Kakashi could only watch, his Sharingan wide with shock. He had seen countless forms of combat, countless bloodlines and jutsu. He had never seen anything like this. Naruto's movements were not his own. They were too refined, too ancient. It was as the muscle memory of 1,000 battles, of 1,000 legendary swordsmen, was flowing through him. The remaining Iowa shinobi, seeing their summoned horrors annihilated, broke and ran. They didn't get far. Naruto raised the sword, and it pulsed with light. Lances of golden energy shot from its tip, faster than any shuriken, and struck each of the fleeing ninja in the back. They fell without a sound, their bodies not pierced, but simply erased. Only the commander remained, frozen in place, his forbidden seal flickering and dying. Naruto walked towards him, the sword held loosely at his side, its tip leaving a faint, steaming furrow in the wet earth. The rain gave him a wide berth, evaporating inches from his radiant form. Blasphemy! The commander shrieked, forming a series of hand seals. You are a demon. You cannot wield the light. Earth style. Bedrock coffin. The ground around Naruto churned, massive slabs of rock rising to crush him. But Naruto simply lifted his sword and plunged it into the mud at his feet. A dome of golden light expanded from the blade, shattering the rock slabs into pebbles. He pulled the sword free and continued his slow, deliberate advance. The commander, his chakra exhausted, fell to his knees. What are you? He whispered, his voice trembling. Naruto stopped before him, the light from the sword illuminating the terror behind the man's mask. For the first time, Naruto spoke, his voice layered with a strange, resonant echo that was not his own. I am your end. He lifted the sword and brought it down. The world turned white. Thousands of miles away, beneath the sun-drenched sky of Italy, a different battle was taking place. It was one of speed and precision. Xenovia Quarta moved like a tempest, her own legendary sword, Durandal, a blur of destructive power. She cleaved through the stone golem animated by rogue Magus, the holy sword shearing through enchanted rock as if it were parchment. Is that the last of them, Irina? She called out, her voice crisp and authoritative. She stood amidst the ruins of a crumbling monastery, her blue hair fanned out behind her, not a single speck of dust on her form-fitting combat attire. A cheerful voice replied from above. Yep, all wrapped up. My Excalibur mimic is pretty good at tying things up, you know. Irina Shido dropped down from a collapsed bell tower, landing gracefully. A rope of pure light, a manifestation of her artificial Excalibur fragment, retracted into the hilt of her own sword. Honestly, these rogue magi are getting less and less creative. A stone golem, so last century. Xenovia didn't smile. She rested the tip of Durandal on the ground, the immense power contained within the holy blade making the very air around it shimmer. Apostasy is never a matter for levity. He defiled a sacred space. He has been judged. Irina sighed, her cheerful demeanor dimming slightly in the face of her partner's unwavering seriousness. Right, right, judgment delivered. Can we get some gelato on the way back to the Vatican? My treat. Before Xenovia could deliver a stern refusal, it happened. It was not a sound or a tremor. It was a feeling, a psychic cataclysm that ripped through the fabric of the world. For a fraction of a second, an invisible sun had been born somewhere in the Far East, and its light had touched everything. Xenovia cried out, stumbling to one knee, her hand flying to her chest. Durandal clattered to the ground, its own light flickering erratically. The sensation was one of overwhelming, raw, untamed holiness. It was a power so immense it dwarfed anything she had ever felt. Even from the highest-ranking seraphim. It was the power of creation itself, wielded with the destructive force of a supernova. What in heaven's name was that? Irina gasped, clutching her head. Xenovia struggled for breath, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached for her sword, and as her fingers brushed the hilt, she felt an echo of the distant power, a strange resonance within her own blade. Durandal was singing. A soft, mournful hum vibrated from the steel, a song of recognition, of longing, of a reunion she could not comprehend. It felt like Durandal, she whispered, her voice filled with awe and confusion, but 1,000 times stronger. Like its very soul was unshackled. A high-frequency communication spell chimed in their ears. It was an urgent summons from the Archbishop. Xenovia answered, her mind still reeling. Report. The voice on the other end was grim, stripped of all pleasantries. Archbishop, we have felt it, Xenovia said, getting straight to the point. An unprecedented release of holy energy. The source is unknown. We have a location, the Archbishop replied, his tone grave. The energy signature, though alien in its structure, has been cross-referenced with the deepest archives. It matches the theoretical readings for the complete, unsealed power of a true holy sword. Specifically, Durandal. Xenovia's eyes widened. That's impossible. I am Durandal's wielder. It is here with me. The power you wield is a fraction of the whole, child. A vessel designed to contain its destructive capabilities. What we just felt was the soul of the sword itself manifesting, independent of its physical anchor. And it has manifested in the most unlikely and dangerous of places. There was a pause. The elemental nations, specifically, Kanahagakar. Irina audibly gasped. The elemental nations were a secular territory, a volatile land of ninja clans and hidden villages, strictly off limits to divine intervention. It was a place where their authority meant nothing. Your new orders are absolute, the Archbishop commanded. Abandon the Excalibur mission. Proceed to Kanahagakar at once. You are to identify the source of this power. If it is a new wielder, you will ascertain their allegiance. If it is a threat, you will neutralize it. And if the soul of Durandal has truly bonded with another, you are to reclaim it for the Church. By any means necessary. Do you understand, Xenovia Quarta? Xenovia's grip tightened on her sword. The hum within the blade was a persistent, nagging question. A part of her sword, her very being, was half a world away. Bonded to another, and that other was in a land of shadow warriors and, according to their intelligence, home to more than a few demonic entities. Yes, Archbishop, she said, her voice hard as steel. I understand completely. The light faded. The rain returned, hissing against Naruto's overheated skin. The world came rushing back in a dizzying wave of sound and sensation, the smell of ozone. The groans of the wounded, the soft patter of rain on leaves. The immense, ancient power that had filled him was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that felt heavier than anything he'd ever experienced. He swayed on his feet, his head pounding. The sword in his hand now felt like a block of lead, its divine weight almost pulling him to the ground. He had to use both hands just to keep it from falling. Naruto. He looked up. Kakashi and Sakura were staring at him, their expressions a mixture of awe, relief, and profound fear. Sakura had her hand half outstretched, as if she wanted to approach him but was afraid to get too close. Sensei. Sakura-chan, he mumbled, his voice his own again. What happened? Kakashi slowly approached, his Sharingan deactivated. his visible eye wide and analytical. He gestured towards the sword. That's what I was about to ask you. Naruto looked down at the blade. The glowing runes had faded, and its brilliant shimmer had dulled to a soft, pearlescent sheen, but it was still the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. I don't know. 1 minute, we were, and then, there was this light. And I had this. He tried to lift the sword to show them, but his arms trembled with the effort. With a grunt, he let it go. It fell, plunging point first into the mud with a heavy, wet thud. It stood there, a silent, gleaming monument to the impossible events that had just transpired. The mission was a catastrophic failure, yet they were alive. They gathered Sai, who was slowly recovering from the paralysis, and made the long, silent journey back to Konoha. Naruto couldn't stop looking over his shoulder, half expecting the sword to have vanished, but it was strapped to Kakashi's back, its way making even the elite Jonin walk with a careful, measured gait. The debriefing was a nightmare. Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, had listened to Kakashi's report with a deepening frown, her fingers steepled before her lips. Shizune stood beside her, looking pale. When Kakashi finished, the room was silent for a long time. Demons? Tsunade finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Hostile entities summoned via a forbidden jutsu. Kakashi corrected, ever precise. But yes, for all intents and purposes, they were demons. Tsunade's gaze shifted to Naruto. And the sword? I don't know, Granny Tsunade. Naruto said for what felt like the 100th time. It just appeared. The sword was brought in. It was laid on a table in the center of the room, and even inert, it seemed to command the space. The village's top seal masters, censor ninjas, and even Inoichi Yamanaka had examined it. Their findings were unanimous. It was a complete anomaly. It wasn't made of any known metal. It didn't radiate chakra. Inoichi had tried to probe it with his mind jutsu and had been repelled by a wall of what he could only describe as blinding, silent music. It was, for all their science and ninjutsu, just a sword. An impossibly sharp, impossibly beautiful, impossibly heavy sword that had appeared out of thin air and annihilated an entire platoon of enemy ninja. Naruto was placed under observation in a secure ward of the hospital for 3 days. They ran every test imaginable, but found nothing. He was just Naruto, exhausted, confused, and now the subject of even more whispers and fearful glances than usual. The story of what happened had been classified at the highest level, but rumors still leaked out. Rumors of a golden light, of a new, terrifying power. On the 4th day, he was released, with strict orders not to leave the village. The sword was to remain in a secure vault in the Hokage Tower. But when they went to retrieve it, it was gone. They found it half an hour later, lying on the bed in Naruto's empty apartment. No seals had been broken. No alarms had been tripped. It had simply returned to him. After that, they gave up trying to separate them. Naruto was tasked with learning to control it, a fool's errand. The sword was a dead weight in his hands. He couldn't swing it properly, let alone summon the golden light. It was a constant, frustrating reminder of a power he had touched for a fleeting moment and couldn't grasp again. Which led him here, to Training Ground 7, the place where his life as a ninja had truly begun. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The sword was plunged into the earth before him, resisting his every attempt to lift it with one hand. "Come on, you stupid thing," he grunted, straining until the veins in his neck stood out. "You worked before. Why won't you work now?" He let go, panting, and slumped to the ground. He stared at the weapon, at its elegant lines and the silent promise of power it held. It felt like a cruel joke. To be given such incredible strength, to save his friends with it, and then to have it locked away, just out of reach. It was the story of his life. It is not a tool to be commanded. The voice was female, crisp, and carried an accent he'd never heard before. It was filled with an unshakable, cold certainty. Naruto shot to his feet, a kunai in his hand, his body instantly tense. He spun around. She stood at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the shade of a large oak tree. She was tall and slender, with striking blue hair cut short and severe. She wore a dark, form-fitting outfit that looked more like something an Anbu would wear than a standard ninja, yet it had no markings he recognized. But it wasn't her appearance that froze him in place. It was the weapon in her hands. It was a sword, a broadsword with a golden, wing-shaped cross guard and a sapphire in its pommel. It was, in every single detail, identical to the one stuck in the ground in front of him. But hers was alive. It hummed with a palpable energy, a faint, holy light shimmering around its blade. She took a step forward, her sharp, intelligent eyes scanning him from head to toe. Her gaze lingered on his stomach, where the Kyuubi was sealed, and her expression hardened with a mixture of contempt and righteous anger. "I have crossed half the world in search of a blasphemy," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. She raised her sword, its point aimed directly at his heart. "And I find it in the form of a boy tainted by a demon." She took another step, her power washing over him. It felt like the light he had unleashed, but colder, more disciplined, and wielded with absolute intent. "My name is Xenovia Quarta. That which you possess is the soul of my sword, the Holy Sword Durandal," she declared, her eyes burning with a zealot's fire. "I have come to reclaim it. Tell me, demon, by what right do you hold a piece of heaven in your hands?" Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. An Unholy Alliance. The name meant nothing to Naruto. Xenovia Quarta, Holy Sword Durandal, heaven. They were just words, foreign and sharp, but the intent behind them was a language he understood perfectly. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of countless villagers his entire life, a mixture of fear and hatred, a judgment passed on him for the beast sealed within his soul. The only difference was the weapon she held. It wasn't a kunai or a pitchfork, it was a blade of divine light that promised a swift, righteous end. His mind raced, processing the impossible situation. Two Durandals, one dead in the ground before him, the other humming with life in her hands. The soul of my sword, she had called it. Had the power he'd touched been stolen? Borrowed? He didn't have a single answer, only the cold, hard reality of the woman advancing on him. "I don't know what you're talking about," Naruto said, his voice low and steady, his knuckles white around the hilt of his kunai. He had faced down Akatsuki members, rogue S-rank ninja, and giant sand demons. He would not be intimidated. "And I don't care. You're not from this village. State your purpose or I'll treat you as a hostile intruder." A flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, crossed Xenovia's face. "My purpose is the recovery of a holy relic from the hands of a demon. My authority comes from a power far greater than your village cage." She took another step, her combat boots making soft imprints in the grass. "Surrender the sword's soul, and the church may yet be merciful." Naruto laughed, a short, sharp bark devoid of humor. "The church, lady. The only authority I recognize is the old lady with the big hat, and she's not going to let you just walk in and take anything." He shifted his stance, his weight balanced on the balls of his feet. "You want it, you'll have to get through me." "As you wish," Xenovia said, her voice dropping the last of its conversational tone. It was now flat, cold, and utterly final. She moved. She was impossibly fast, crossing the remaining 20 yards of the clearing in a blink. There was no wasted motion, no theatrical buildup. One moment she was there, the next she was on him, he. Durandal, a descending arc of silver blue light aimed at his neck. Naruto's instincts, honed by 100 life or death battles, screamed. He threw himself backward, tucking into a roll, the holy SWO. Road slicing through the air where his head had been. The sheer force of the swing carved a deep, clean gouge in the earth. He came up on one knee, his heart hammering. He hadn't even seen her move, just the result. He didn't have time to recover. Xenovia flowed into her next attack, a blindingly fast series of thrusts. It wasn't the wild, chaotic fighting of a ninja. It was a dance of pure, lethal geometry. Each thrust was perfectly aimed, forcing him back, keeping him on the defensive. He deflected the strikes with his kunai, the mundane steel groaning in protest as it met the holy blade. Sparks flew, each one a miniature starburst of golden light. He was completely outmatched in swordsmanship. It was a fact he had to accept in the first 3 seconds of the fight. But he was a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. He didn't fight fair. As she lunged with another powerful thrust, he didn't dodge. He slapped his hands together in a cross seal. Shadow clone jutsu. With a puff of smoke, a dozen Narutos erupted into the clearing, scattering in every direction. Xenovia's thrust pierced one of the clones, which dissipated into nothingness. She paused for a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sudden crowd. Tricks, she scoffed, but there was a new note of caution in her voice. The clones didn't hesitate. They swarmed her, kunai drawn, attacking from all angles. She became a whirlwind of steel and light. Her Durandal was a blur, deflecting, parrying, and destroying. She cut down clone after clone, each one bursting into smoke, but the sheer numbers were doing their job. They were forcing her to stay in one place, her movements now dedicated to defense rather than offense. The real Naruto, hidden amongst the chaos, was forming a Rasengan. The familiar, comforting whir of spiraling chakra filled his palm. He saw his opening. 2 clones attacked her high, forcing her to block upwards. He shot forward, low to the ground, aiming for her exposed side. "Got you," he roared. He was a foot away when her sword came down in a crushing, vertical slash that seemed to defy physics, destroying the 2 clones and continuing its path toward him. He had no time to dodge. He had to abort the Rasengan. Throwing himself to the side, the wind from her blade buffeting his face. He rolled and came up panting, his strategy in tatters. She was too good. Her senses were too sharp. She hadn't been overwhelmed at all. She'd been waiting for the real one to show himself. "Your techniques are crude," she stated, her Durandal held in a ready stance. A disorderly swarm, relying on numbers instead of skill. Such is the way of a demon. A surge of red, hot anger flared in Naruto's gut. The Kyuubi stirred, its chakra leaking into his own, his eyes shifting to a dangerous slit pupil red. "Shut up," he growled, the sound deeper, more guttural than his normal voice. "You don't know anything about me." He reached down and, with a roar of effort fueled by the Kyuubi's power, he ripped the second Durandal from the earth. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, a jolt of energy shot up his arm. The dead weight was gone. The sword was light, alive, humming in his hand. The runes on its blade began to glow with a faint, golden light, mirroring the silver-blue glow of Xenovia's. Xenovia gasped, her composure finally breaking. She stared at the blade in his hand, then at hers. A low, resonant thrum filled the air, a vibration that seemed to emanate from both swords at once. It was a discordant harmony, a song of 2 halves recognizing each other but separate by the incompatible natures of their wielders. "Impossible," she breathed. "The soul is responding to you, to the demon." Naruto didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel it. The sword was an inferno in his hand, a conduit for a power he could barely contain. The Kyuubi's foul chakra and the sword's holy energy were swirling together within him, a volatile, agonizing mixture. It felt like his very veins were being filled with fire and ice. He channeled the chaotic energy into the blade and charged. The duel that followed was not a contest of skill. It was a cataclysm. When their swords met for the first time, the impact created a shockwave that tore up the ground and flattened the surrounding trees. A sphere of distorted energy, half golden light, half crimson malice, erupted from the point of impact, throwing both of them backward. Naruto landed on his feet, his body screaming in protest. The feedback from the clash was immense, a psychic shriek that echoed in his skull. Xenovia was likewise staggered, her face pale. The resonance between the 2 swords was a weapon in itself. "Stop resisting the blade," she yelled at him, her voice strained. "You are corrupting its divine light with your demonic filth. Maybe it likes it." Naruto roared back, charging again. He fought like a cornered animal, all instinct and fury. He had no technique, no formal stances. He swung the massive broadsword with the wild, unpredictable abandon of a street brawler, each swing carrying the force of a battering ram. Xenovia, for all her skill, was forced onto the defensive. His raw power was monstrous. She was a fencer facing a berserker with a sledgehammer. She parried a vicious overhead swing, the impact making her teeth rattle. Arcs of gold and red energy lashed out from their blades, scorching the earth. "You fight without honor, without discipline." "I fight to win," Naruto grunted, pushing her back. He channeled his chakra into his feet, vanishing in a burst of speed. Eden reappearing behind her, a basic substitution jutsu. He swung for her back. Xenovia spun, her own sword coming up to block with a ringing clang that echoed across the village. Her eyes were wide with a new, grudging respect. A spatial displacement technique, clever. Before they could continue their clash, a third voice cut through the air, laced with a familiar, weary authority. That's enough, both of you. They broke apart, turning in unison. Kakashi Hatake stood on the branch of a surviving tree, his single eye gazing down at them, his expression unreadable. He wasn't alone. A full squad of Anbu, their chakra signatures hidden, had surrounded the training ground. Naruto, stand down, Kakashi said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He then turned his gaze to Xenovia. And as for you, you have 10 seconds to explain why you are trespassing in Konoha and attacking one of our shinobi before I authorize the use of lethal force. Xenovia's eyes narrowed, but she could feel dozens of hidden presences around them, the killing intent held tightly in check. She was good, but she wasn't foolish enough to think she could take on an entire village's special forces. My mission here is a matter of holy importance, she said, her Durandal still held at the ready. It does not concern you. Anything that happens within our walls concerns us, Kakashi replied, dropping lightly to the ground between them. Especially when it involves a weapon of that magnitude. The tense standoff was shattered by a scream from the direction of the village. It was a civilian, filled with pure terror. Then another, and another. A wave of dark, malevolent energy washed over the training ground, a presence that made Naruto's skin crawl with a sickening familiarity. It was the same foul energy as the demons from the forest. What now? Naruto growled, turning his attention toward the village. It seems your clash has attracted some unwanted attention, Kakashi said grimly. He looked from Naruto's glowing golden sword to Xenovia's shimmering blue one. That much power, holy and demonic, all in one place, it's like a beacon for every stray thing that lurks in the shadows. From alleys and rooftops of the village periphery, they emerged. Stray devils, twisted, grotesque parodies of life. Some were reptilian, others insectoid, all of them radiating an aura of bloodlust and corruption. There were dozens of them. Far more than the scouts they had encountered before. Xenovia's head whipped around, her expression turning from hostility to disgust. Filth. The underworld's refuse has no place here. One of the larger strays, a hulking beast with bat-like wings and chitinous armor, let out a guttural roar and charged, its eyes locked on Naruto. Xenovia moved without thinking. She intercepted the beast, her Durandal cleaving through its armored hide in a single, effortless slash. The creature dissolved into black dust before it even hit the ground. Naruto stared at her, stunned. They are an affront to the natural order, she said, not looking at him, her eyes scanning the approaching horde. My mission is to eliminate such threats. Another stray, this one small and spider-like, tried to scuttle past her to get to Naruto. He reacted just as instinctively. He brought his own Durandal down in a crushing blow that vaporized the creature and shattered the ground beneath it. For a moment, they stood back to back, surrounded by the chittering horde, their twin swords glowing in the twilight. Kakashi watched them, a thoughtful expression on his face. Well, he said to himself. This is interesting. Listen to me, Naruto said to Xenovia, his voice low and urgent. Their leader is going to be the big one. I'll draw its fire, you clean up the small fry. When I give the signal, we hit it together. Xenovia bristled at being given orders, especially by him. But she couldn't fault the logic. His raw power was better suited to taking on the larger brutes. While her speed and precision were perfect for crowd control. Fine, she clipped out. But try not to get in my way. With that, their truce was sealed in the face of a common enemy. The battle began. It was nothing like their duel. Against the stray devils, their movements, which had clashed so violently against each other, now complemented each other with a frightening efficiency. Xenovia was a storm of steel, her Durandal creating wide, sweeping arcs of holy energy that disintegrated multiple strays at once. Her area of effect attacks created a perimeter, a kill zone none of the smaller demons could cross. This freed Naruto to focus on the heavy hitters. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of chaotic, overwhelming power. He met a charging, bull-like demon head-on, his golden Durandal clashing with its horns. He didn't bother with finesse, he simply overpowered it, the combination of his physical strength and the sword's energy shattering the demon's defenses and blowing it apart. They moved in an unconscious rhythm, covering each other's blind spots. When a winged devil dived at Xenovia from above, Naruto launched a clone into the air to intercept it. When Naruto was pinned down by a stray that could spit corrosive acid, Xenovia was there, her blade flashing as she severed its head from its shoulders. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. It was as if the two swords were communicating, guiding their wielders in a perfect, deadly dance. Kakashi and the Anbu squad engaged the strays that slipped past the pair, ensuring none of them reached the civilian sectors. Kakashi was a whirlwind of lightning and steel, but his eyes kept drifting back to Naruto and Xenovia. He was witnessing the birth of a partnership that defied all logic. Finally, only one stray remained. It was a massive, bloated thing, a monstrosity of mismatched limbs and mouths that gibbered and drooled. It had been hanging back, observing. It was clearly the leader. Now, Naruto yelled. He charged forward, his Durandal blazing. The beast roared, meeting his charge with a torrent of dark energy fired from one of its many mouths. Naruto slid to a halt, plunging his sword into the ground. A dome of golden light, just like the one he'd used against the Iowa commander, erupted around him, deflecting the blast. The effort left him open for a split second. But Xenovia was already moving. Using the dome as a launching point, she ran up its curved surface, launching herself high into the air. She came down like a sapphire meteor, her Durandal aimed at the creature's head. "In the name of the Lord, be thou purged," she cried. Her blade struck true, plunging deep into the demon's skull. The creature let out a deafening shriek of agony. But it was tough. Its flesh began to bubble and reform around her sword, trying to trap her. "Naruto," she yelled, her voice strained as she struggled to pull her weapon free. Naruto ripped his sword from the ground. He poured every last ounce of the chaotic, mixed energy he could muster into the blade. It ignited with golden-orange flames, the maelstrom of holy and demonic power he had briefly touched in the forest. With a final, desperate roar, he threw it. The sword spun through the air like a giant, flaming shuriken, a perfect spiral of destructive energy. It struck the wounded stray leader in its bloated midsection. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the creature was consumed from the inside out by a column of golden-orange light. When the light faded, there was nothing left but a scorch mark on the ground and the faint smell of ozone. Xenovia landed gracefully, pulling her own Durandal free as the beast dissolved. She stared at the spot where it had been, then back at Naruto, who was leaning on his knees, panting from the exertion. His sword lay on the ground a few feet away, its light fading. Before the silence could get too awkward, the Anbu moved in, securing the area. Kakashi approached the two of them. "Impressive teamwork," he said, his eye crinkling in what might have been a smile. "For two people who were trying to kill each other 5 minutes ago." Suddenly, one of the Anbu called out, "Captain Hatake, we have a survivor." Barely. They found it pinned under some rubble, one of the smaller spider-like strays, its legs broken. It hissed at them, its multiple eyes glowing with impotent rage. Xenovia stepped forward, raising her sword to deliver the final blow. "Wait," Naruto said, putting a hand on her arm. She flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. "Let's ask it some questions first." He crouched down in front of the hissing creature. "Who sent you? Why are you here?" The stray spat a glob of black ichor that sizzled near his foot. You are the target, the union of the beast and the blade," it hissed. Its voice like grinding stones. "Union? What union?" Naruto pressed. "Our master. He desires it. The power it will unleash. He wants the Jinchuriki who wields the holy light." The stray's voice grew weaker. "We are but the first wave, the first test. Kokobeel's glorious war is coming." With a final, rattling gasp, the creature dissolved into dust. A heavy silence fell over the group. Kokobeel. The name was unknown to them, but the intent was clear. This wasn't a random attack. They had been targeted. The power Naruto had awakened, this impossible fusion, had put a target on his back. And on the entire village. Xenovia looked at Naruto, her expression complex. The contempt was gone, replaced by a grudging understanding. He was a demon, a Jinchuriki. That was a fact, but he had fought to protect this village, his home. And the power he wielded, corrupted as it might be, had been undeniably effective. Her mission was to reclaim the sword's soul. But the Kree, Atur's words implied a threat far greater than a single boy with a holy relic. A war, led by someone named Kokobile. Naruto met her gaze, his own exhaustion evident. "Look," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know who this Kokobile is. And I still don't know what's going on with these swords. But he's targeting my home. That makes him my enemy." He looked her straight in the eye. "You said your job is to eliminate threats like this. Well, it looks like we've got a big one on our doorstep." He extended a hand, not in friendship, but in pragmatism. "We can go back to trying to kill each other later. For now, we have a common enemy. Let's work together to stop him." Xenovia stared at his outstretched hand. Everything in her training, her faith, her very being, screamed at her to reject it. An alliance with a demon host was heresy. But she could not deny the truth of his words. A great threat was coming, a threat drawn by this very paradox. Her duty to protect the world from the forces of darkness was absolute. And right now, the most powerful weapon against that darkness was standing right in front of her. With a deep, frustrated sigh, she sheathed her Durandal. She did not take his hand, but she gave a curt, sharp nod. "Very well, Jinchuriki. We have an alliance. For now." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Fallen Star's Gambit. The Hokage's office felt smaller than usual, the air TCK with tension and the smell of old paper and ozone. Outside, a small army of technicians and barrier corps ninja were working tirelessly to repair the damage from the previous night's battle. Their shouts muted by the reinforced glass of the windows. Inside, there was only a strained, heavy silence. Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, sat behind her mountain of paperwork, her expression a mask of grim concentration. She rubbed her temples with her thumb and forefinger, a gesture Naruto knew meant she was grappling with a headache of epic proportions. Kakashi stood near the window, his posture relaxed, but his visible eye sharp and missing nothing. Naruto stood in the center of the room, shifting his weight from foot to foot, the unfamiliar weight of his Durandal, now silent and inert, strapped to his back. And then there was Xenovia. She stood perfectly still, her back ramrod straight, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked like a statue carved from ice and steel, her face an impassive mask that betrayed none of the turmoil that must have been churning beneath. She had been introduced to the Hokage as an ecclesiastical specialist, sent to consult on a unique energy phenomenon, a cover story so thin it was transparent. But it was the best Kakashi could come up with on short notice. "Let me see if I have this straight," Tsunade said, her voice dangerously low. She leaned forward, her glare pinning Xenovia in place. "You're telling me that this attack wasn't from a rival ninja village, but from stray devils." She said the words as if tasting something foul. "And that they were sent by a fallen angel, named Kokobile, who is a high-ranking officer in one of 3 supernatural factions, angels, devils, and fallen angels, who were once locked in a great war for dominion over the planet." "That is a crude but largely accurate summary, Hokage Dono," Xenovia replied, her tone clipped and formal. It was clear she felt addressing a secular leader was beneath her, but she was maintaining a professional facade. Tsunade's fist clenched on her desk. "Crude. I'll give you crude. For years, we have fought wars over chakra, territory, and bloodlines. We have dealt with giant beasts, shadow organizations, and threats that could level entire nations. And now you are telling me that there has been an entire secret world of gods and monsters hiding in the shadows, and they have decided to make my village their new battlefield." "It is not a decision," Xenovia corrected her coolly. "It is a consequence. The Jinchuriki." She nodded curtly at Naruto, refusing to use his name. "Has awakened a power that has disrupted the balance. His existence, the fusion of a powerful demonic entity and a top-tier holy relic, is an anomaly. Kokobile is not attacking your village. He is drawn to the boy. Your village is simply in the way." Naruto bristled. "Hey, I'm right here, you know. And I'm not just some thing that's causing problems. I protected this village by unleashing a power you do not comprehend and cannot control," Xenovia countered without even glancing at him. "You are a beacon in the dark, and you have drawn the mobs to your flame." "Enough." Tsunade slammed her hand on the desk, the sound cracking through the tension like a whip. "I don't care about your theological squabbles. What I care about is the threat to my people. This Kokobile. What do we know about him? Kakashi stepped forward. According to Xenovia-san, he is a leader-class fallen angel, a veteran of the Great War. He is known for his fascination with warfare and his extreme power, particularly in creating light-based weaponry. The strays we encountered were likely his advance force, sent to test Naruto's capabilities. And what is his goal? Tsunade pressed. War. Xenovia stated simply. Quote, Kokobile is a warmonger who believes the fragile truce between the three factions has made them all weak. He wishes to reignite the Great War. And he believes the energy that can be produced by the Enchiriki and the soul of Durandal clashing is the key to doing so. The room fell silent again as the implications of her words sank in. Kokobile wasn't just trying to capture Naruto. He was trying to provoke a conflict on a global scale, using Konoha as the kindling. So, we need to find him, Naruto said, his voice determined. We find him and we stop him before he can start anything. Tsunade looked at him, then at Xenovia. An expression of deep frustration crossed her face. As much as I hate to admit it, he's right. We can't sit back and wait for this fallen angel to make the next move. Her gaze settled on Xenovia. You know more about this world than we do. You know how to track these things. Then she turned to Naruto. And you are the bait. Whether we like it or not, he wants you. She sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of her decision. The two of you will work together. Form a reconnaissance team. Kakashi will be your operational commander, but you two will be on the front line. Find Kokobile's base of operations. Assess his strength, but do not engage. Is that understood? Naruto nodded eagerly. Xenovia gave another stiff, formal bow. Understood, Hokage Dono. Good, Tsunade said, slumping back in her chair. Now get out of my office. I need a drink. Working with Xenovia was like trying to hug a cactus. She was prickly, rigid, and seemed to find his very existence offensive. Their patrol of Konoha's vast, forested outskirts began in a silence so thick he could have cut it with a kunai. She moved with a silent, purposeful grace, her eyes constantly scanning. Her hand never far from the hilt of her sheathed Durandal. He moved with a shinobi's stealth, flitting from branch to branch, his own senses on high alert. They were searching for any trace of demonic energy, any sign of Kokobile's forces. Naruto was using his sage mode training to sense the natural energy of the area, trying to pick out any unnatural disturbances. Xenovia, he learned, had her own method. She would occasionally stop, close her eyes, and hold a small, silver cross that hung from her neck, seemingly listening to the world in a way he couldn't understand. Anything? He asked, dropping down from a tree to land beside her during one of her pauses. If I detected something, I would have informed you, she said without opening her eyes. Right, of course, he muttered, kicking at a loose stone. You know, for someone who's supposed to be on my team, you're not very team-like. Her eyes snapped open, a flash of sapphire blue fire. This is not a team. It is a temporary, strategic alliance of convenience. I am here to neutralize a threat to global stability. You are here because you are the cause of it. How is any of this my fault? He shot back, his frustration boiling over. I didn't ask for this sword. I didn't ask for devils to come crawling out of the woodwork. You exist, she said, her voice flat and cold. Your very nature is a contradiction that unravels the established order. You are a vessel of demonic power, yet you hold a sacred relic. Such a paradox cannot exist without consequence. They stood there, glaring at each other in the dappled sunlight of the forest. The animosity between them was a palpable thing. But beneath it, Naruto sensed something else. It wasn't just contempt in her eyes. There was confusion, a deep, unsettling uncertainty that she was trying to mask with rigid hostility. She was looking at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve, and it infuriated her. You know, he said, his voice softer now. You talk a lot about demons and holy stuff. But you haven't really looked at me. You just look at the Kyuubi. You see a monster, not a person. Her expression faltered for a fraction of a second. The distinction is irrelevant, is it? He pressed. You saw me last night. I fought to protect people. My friends. My home. Is that what a monster does? She had no answer for that. She turned away, her jaw tight. We are wasting time. We must continue the search. They carried on, the silence returning, but something had shifted. The air was still tense, but now it was laced with unspoken questions. Hours later, as dusk began to settle, they found it. It wasn't a surge of demonic energy, but the opposite, a void. A patch of the forest, a few miles from the village, where the natural energy was just gone. It was a dead zone, silent and sterile. At the center of this zone, half hidden by overgrown vines, was a structure that had no place in the land of fire. It was an old, European-style cathedral, its stone walls crumbling. Its stained glass windows shattered. "What is this place?" Naruto whispered, a chill running down his spine. "A relic from a time before your hidden villages," Xenovia said, her eyes narrowed. "The church sent missionaries across the world centuries ago. Most of their outposts fell into ruin." Her hand went to her cross, her knuckles white. "This place, it has been desecrated." She could feel it, a foul stain on what should have been hallowed ground. The lingering scent of sulfur and corruption clung to the air. As they drew closer, they saw them, black feathers, scat. Red on the stone steps leading up to the massive, rotting oak doors. "This is it," Naruto said, his senses on high alert. "This has to be his base. We should report back," Xenovia said, reciting her orders. "Our mission is reconnaissance only. And let him get away." Naruto countered. "No way. We need to know what we're up against. We go in, we take a quick look, and we get out." Quietly, Xenovia hesitated. His logic was sound, even if it was a direct violation of their orders. If Kokobile was here, they couldn't risk him relocating before the village could mount a proper assault. With a reluctant nod, she drew her Durandal. Its silver-blue light was a comforting presence in the growing gloom. Naruto, in turn, drew his own. The golden blade remained inert, a dead weight, but it felt solid and reassuring in his grip. They pushed open the heavy doors, which groaned in protest, and stepped inside. The interior of the cathedral was a cavern of shadows. Faint moonlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. The pews were overturned and smashed, the altar at the far end cracked and spray-painted with blasphemous, demonic sigils. The place reeked of decay and malevolence. They moved slowly, back to back, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. There were no guards, no traps, no sign of life. It was completely abandoned. "He's not here," Naruto whispered, disappointment coloring his tone. "We missed him." "Perhaps not," a new voice said, smooth as silk and dripping with arrogant amusement. It echoed from the vaulted ceilings, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Perhaps he was simply waiting for his guests of honor to arrive. Naruto and Xenovia spun around, their swords at the ready. High above, perched on a surviving crossbeam like a great, dark bird, was a man. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp-featured way, with long black hair and eyes that seemed to drink in the darkness. He wore sleek black armor, and from his back sprouted not one, but 10 magnificent black wings. Kokobile. He dropped from the rafters, landing on the desecrated altar without a sound. He spread his arms wide, a theatrical gesture of welcome. "Naruto Uzumaki, Xenovia Quarta, welcome to my humble sanctuary. I must confess, I have been so looking forward to this meeting." "Kokobile," Xenovia spat, her voice laced with venom. She raised her Durandal, its point aimed at his chest. "Your reign of terror ends now, fallen one." Kokobile chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "My dear, zealous child, my reign of terror has not even begun. This is merely the prologue." His gaze shifted to Naruto, his eyes gleaming with a predatory, analytical light. "And you are even more fascinating in person. The sheer chaos of your existence. The beast of hatred sealed with the purest love of a mother's sacrifice. And now, you hold the soul of Roland's legendary blade. A beautiful, exquisite paradox." He started to walk towards them, his steps slow and deliberate. He completely ignored Xenovia's threatening posture. "I have a patron, you know. A being of considerable power and antiquity. He finds your existence equally fascinating. He wonders what will happen when your two energies, demonic and holy, are pushed to their absolute limit. Will they annihilate each other? Or will they create something new? Something glorious? We're not your science experiment." Naruto growled, taking a protective step in front of Xenovia. Kokobile smiled. Oh, but you are. You both are. My goal is simple. I will force you to fight. I will. I'll push you until you unleash that marvelous, world-shaking power you displayed last night. And when that energy erupts, it will be a signal. A declaration. The truce is over. The Great War is back. And it will all start here. In this quaint little village of tree jumpers. He stopped, his smile widening as he turned his full attention to Xenovia. And you, my dear church dog. You are the most amusing part of this whole affair. Your devotion, your unwavering faith, it's almost admirable. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Tell me, what do you think your precious God thinks of his most holy sword being wielded by a demon? What divine plan could this possibly be a part of? Do not speak his name with your filthy tongue. Xenovia roared, lunging forward, her sword a blur of holy light. Kokobile didn't even move. He simply raised a hand, and a barrier of dark light appeared before him, stopping her blade dead. The impact sent a shockwave through the cathedral. He chided, his smile turning cruel. Such passion, such fire, all for a lie. He flicked his wrist, and the barrier threw her backward. Naruto caught her before she could fall. What are you talking about? Xenovia demanded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Oh, you poor, ignorant child, Kokobile said, his voice dripping with mock pity. You run around, carrying out the will of a being who isn't there. You pray to a silent throne. You fight for a kingdom with no king. He let the words hang in the air, savoring the moment, the dawning horror on Xenovia's face. Your devotion is meaningless, he said, his voice now a cold, hard blade of truth. Because the God of the Bible is dead. He was killed in the last great war, along with the original 4 great Satans. He's gone. A memory. A ghost that your precious church props up to keep the sheep like you in line. The world stopped. For Xenovia, the sound in the cathedral faded away. The sight of Kokobile's sneering face, of Naruto's shocked expression. It all blurred into an indistinct haze. The only thing that was real were his words. God is dead. Her sword felt heavy in her hand. The divine power that flowed from it, the power she had dedicated her entire life to serving, suddenly felt hollow, empty. Her faith was not a shield. It was a cage, and Kokobile had just shattered it into a million pieces. She remembered her childhood in the orphanage. The endless prayers for a better life. She remembered her training, the grueling years of dedicating her body and soul to a cause she believed was righteous and absolute. She remembered every enemy she had struck down in his name, every life she had taken, convinced of her divine mandate. It was all a lie. Her Durandal clattered from her numb fingers, hitting the stone floor with a ringing clang that echoed the shattering of her soul. She stumbled backward, her eyes wide and vacant. No, she whispered, the word a fragile, broken thing. No, you're lying. Kokobile's laughter filled the cathedral. A triumphant, cruel sound. Oh, my dear, why would I lie about something so wonderful? Seeing Xenovia's complete breakdown, Naruto's shock turned to pure, unadulterated rage. You bastard, he roared, and he charged, his own inert Durandal held like a club. Predictable, Kokobile sighed. He raised a single finger. A dozen spears of pure, condensed light materialized in the air around him. With a lazy flick of his wrist, they shot toward Naruto. Naruto was fast, but he couldn't dodge them all. He brought his sword up to block, but the inert blade offered no divine protection. The spears of light slammed into him, piercing his arms and legs, pinning him to the cathedral floor like an insect. The pain was immense, a searing, burning agony that was somehow clean and foul at the same time. He cried out, his body convulsing as the holy light burned his demonic chakra. Kokobile walked over to him, looking down with disdain. You see, without the soul of the blade awakening, you are nothing. Just a child with a toy you don't understand. He placed a foot on Naruto's chest, pressing down. This has been a disappointing first meeting. I expected more. He looked over at the catatonic Xenovia. Then back at Naruto. I will leave you with an ultimatum. In 2 days, bring the girl and both halves of Durandal to the highest peak you can see from your village. Surrender them to me. If you do, I will merely destroy Konoha. If you do not, I will kill every man, woman, and child in it before I turn it to glass. He removed his foot and spread his 10 wings, bathing the ruined cathedral in an oppressive, dark light. "Think on it," he said, his voice echoing as he began to rise into the air. "Ponder the silence of your dead god. And despair." With a final, mocking smile, he vanished through the shattered roof, leaving behind only the cold, empty silence and the broken forms of the two champions who had come to stop him. For a long time, there was no sound but Naruto's pained gasps and the soft, distant whisper of the wind. The spears of light dissolved, leaving him bleeding and trembling on the cold stone. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming, the Kyuubi's chakra already struggling to heal the holy wounds. He looked over at Xenovia. She hadn't moved. She was on her knees, staring at her fallen sword, her expression utterly blank. The fiery, zealous warrior was gone. In her place was a lost, broken girl. He crawled over to her, his own pain forgotten. He reached out a hesitant, trembling hand and placed it on her shoulder. She didn't even flinch. "Xenovia," he whispered. Her head slowly turned to look at him. Her eyes were hollow. "He's dead," she said, her voice a monotone whisper. "God is dead. My entire life. Everything I fought for, it was for nothing." Naruto's heart ached for her. He didn't understand her faith, her God, or her church. But he understood devotion. He understood what it meant to have something to believe in. And he understood what it felt like to have it ripped away. He sat down in front of her, ignoring the blood and the pain. He looked at her, not at the holy warrior, but at the girl underneath. "Maybe he is," Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through her despair. "Maybe everything you believed in was a lie." She flinched, a flicker of pain finally showing in her vacant eyes. "But look around," he continued, gesturing vaguely towards the direction of the village. "The people in Konoha, Tsunade, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura-chan, all of my friends, they're not a lie. They're real. They live, and they breathe, and they fight for each other." He met her gaze, his own eyes burning with a fierce, unwavering conviction. "Maybe your god is dead," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "But these people, my friends, they're alive. And I'll fight for them. My whole life, I've fought for them." He paused, letting his words sink in. He saw a flicker of light in the depths of her hollow eyes. A tiny spark of the fire he'd seen before. "I can't beat that guy alone," he admitted, his voice dropping. "I need you, not the church's soldier. You, fight with me, Xenovia. Not for some dead god or some holy mission. Fight for the people who are alive right now. Fight for a reason that's real." He didn't offer her a comforting lie or an easy answer. He offered her a new purpose. A new creed, forged not in heaven, but in the mud and blood of the world they lived in. He offered her a reason to stand up, to pick up her sword, and to fight again. For the first time since Kokobeel's revelation, Xenovia truly saw him. Not the Jinchuriki, not the demon, not the paradox. She saw Naruto Uzumaki, and in his eyes, she saw a conviction that had no need for a god to sustain it. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. It was a tear of grief, of loss, but also of a tiny, fragile, burgeoning hope. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Maelstrom over Konoha. The silence in the ruined cathedral was a living thing. A heavy shroud woven from despair and the metallic scent of blood. For a long moment, Naruto's words hung in the air, a fragile bridge thrown across the abyss of Xenovia's shattered faith. He watched her, his body screaming in protest, his own pain a distant drumbeat against the more immediate, pressing concern for the broken woman kneeling before him. Slowly, hesitantly, Xenovia lifted her head. The hollowness was still in her eyes, a vast, echoing emptiness where a lifetime of devotion used to be. But in their depths, a single, defiant spark had been kindled. It was not the righteous fire of a holy warrior, but the grim, stubborn ember of a survivor. She looked at his outstretched hand, then at her own, which lay limp in her lap. Then, her gaze fell upon her Durandal, lying discarded on the cold stone. It wasn't a holy relic anymore. It wasn't a gift from a benevolent god. It was a tool, a weapon. It was hers. With a shuddering breath that was half sob, half growl, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. He pulled her to her feet, her movements stiff and uncertain, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She retrieved her sword, her expression unreadable, and slid it into its sheath. The easy, practiced grace was gone. The action was deliberate, mechanical. "The mission is not over," she said, her voice a rough, unused whisper. "The threat remains." "Yeah," Naruto said, forcing a grin despite the searing pain from his wounds. "Let's go tell Granny Tsunade the bad news." The journey back was a blur of pain and grim silence. Naruto had to lean on Xenovia for support, the holy wounds inflicted by Kokobeel's light spears resisting the Kyuubi's healing factor with stubborn tenacity. They didn't talk. There were no words for the catastrophe that had unfolded. Xenovia was locked in the prison of her own mind, grappling with a truth that had invalidated her entire existence. Naruto was focused on putting one foot in front of the other, his mind racing. Replaying Kokobeel's ultimatum over and over again. Destroy Konoha, or kill everyone in it. When they finally staggered through the village gates, the sun was long gone, replaced by a cold, indifferent moon. Kakashi met them there, his single eye widening at the state of them. He said nothing, simply slung Naruto's arm over his other shoulder and helped them directly to the Hokage Tower. The report was delivered in Tsunade's private strategy room, a stark, functional chamber dominated by a massive map of the elemental nations. The air was thick with the smoke from Asuma Sarutobi's cigarette. Shikamaru Nara was there, his hands clasped behind his head, his expression already one of intense, weary calculation. Tsunade listened, her face growing darker with every word. When Naruto finished recounting Kokobeel's ultimatum, she slammed her fist onto the table with such force that the solid oak cracked. "He thinks he can threaten us," she snarled, her voice trembling with a rage that made the room feel cold. "He thinks he can march up to the gates of the Hidden Leaf and make demands. This village was built by the first Hokage, a man who could tame the tailed beasts. It survived the attack of the Nine Tails, the invasion of Orochimaru, and the assault of the Akatsuki. We do not kneel." Her eyes, burning with the infamous will of fire, scanned the room. "Shikamaru, I want a full-scale defensive strategy drawn up by sunrise. Every Jonin, every Chunin, every available shinobi is to be mobilized. I want a triple-layer barrier around the entire village. Evacuate all civilians to the underground shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Konoha is now at war." Shikamaru's eyes were already closed, his brilliant mind processing countless variables. "The enemy's forces are unknown, but likely consist of non-chakra-based entities. Our standard tactics may be less effective. We need to focus on large-scale physical and elemental jutsu. Long-range support will be critical." He nodded slowly. "It's a drag, but I'll have a plan." Tsunade then turned her gaze to the two who had brought this storm to their doorstep. Her expression softened slightly. "You two, get to the hospital, get healed. You're our front line. I do not require assistance," Xenovia stated, her voice still flat. "My body is uninjured." "I wasn't talking about your body," Tsunade said, her gaze sharp and perceptive. She saw the wound that no medical ninjutsu could heal. "Go, rest, find your center. Because tomorrow, I need a warrior, not a ghost." The next 36 hours were a blur of controlled, frantic activity. The entire village transformed into a fortress. The quiet, peaceful streets were now filled with the determined faces of shinobi, the air humming with He energy of barrier seals being erected. The sound of a village preparing for battle was a symphony of shouted orders, ringing steel, and the low thrum of immense chakra being gathered. Naruto spent hours in the hospital, with Sakura and Shizune working tirelessly to purge the lingering holy energy from his wounds. The process was agonizing, but he endured it, his mind focused on the coming fight. Xenovia did not rest. She found an empty training ground and spent every waking hour in a maelstrom of motion. She trained with a ferocity that bordered on self-destruction. Her graceful, elegant swordsmanship was gone, replaced by a brutal, relentless assault. Each swing of her Durandal was a roar of defiance, a scream of rage against the silent heaven that had abandoned her. She was no longer a soldier of God. She was fighting for the only thing she had left, her own will to exist, to resist, to not be broken. Naruto found her there, late on the final night before the deadline. She was standing in the center of a cratered, splintered landscape, her body drenched in sweat, her breath coming in ragged heaves. "You're going to wear yourself out before the fight even starts," he said softly, offering her a bottle of water. She ignored it, her knuckles white on the hilt of her sword. I am honing my blade. You're trying to forget, he corrected gently. She finally looked at him, her yes shadowed with a pain so deep it made his own scars ache. There is nothing to forget. There is only a void. Then fill it with something else, he said. He walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. When I was a kid, I was all alone. Everyone looked at me like I was a monster. I had nothing. So, I filled that emptiness with a dream. A big, stupid dream to become Hokage, so everyone would have to look at me and acknowledge me. He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. It's what kept me going. It's what I fought for. He looked out at the lights of the village, at the Hokage monument carved into the mountain. My dreams changed a little since then. It's not about a title anymore. It's about protecting this. All of it. The people who finally acknowledged me. My friends. That's what I'm filling my life with. That's my reason. He looked back at her. You need a reason, Xenovia. Not one that was given to you. One you choose for yourself. She stared at him, his simple, honest word. Cutting through the fog of her despair. She thought of his offer in the cathedral. Fight for the people who are alive right now. A reason that was real. Her grip on her sword relaxed. She finally took the water bottle from his hand. Her fingers brushing against his. Thank you, Naruto. It was the first time she had used his name. Dawn broke on the second day, painting the sky in bloody shades of crimson and orange. A single, mournful horn blast echoed from the village walls. The deadline had arrived. The air was still, pregnant with a terrible anticipation. Every shinobi in Konoha was in position, their faces grim. Their weapons ready. Then, the sky tore open. It wasn't a subtle tear. It was a violent, screaming rip in the fabric of reality, a swirling vortex of black and purple energy. That opened directly above the Hokage monument. From this gaping wound, Kokobeel's army poured forth. Stray devils of every shape and size swarmed out like a plague of locusts. Towering, three-headed, Cerberus hounds with fire dripping from their maws bounded through the portal, their roars shaking the very foundations of the village. All units, engage. Tsunade's voice, amplified by jutsu, boomed across the village. The defense of Konoha began. Earthen walls, courtesy of the Anbu's Doten users, rose to meet the first wave. A volley of 1,000 explosive tagged kunai turned the sky into a tapestry of fire and shrapnel. The battle on the ground was fierce. Might Guy, a green whirlwind of youthful energy, opened the sixth gate and blasted a Cerberus back with a morning peacock that lit up the battlefield. Asuma and his team moved in perfect sync, their wind-enhanced blades cutting down strays. Hiba and Akamaru were a feral vortex of tooth and claw, ripping through the enemy's ranks with a fang over fang. Shikamaru, from a command post atop the Hokage Tower, directed the flow of battle, his shadow possession jutsu locking down key targets, creating openings for others. But the enemy was endless. For every stray they cut down, 3 more took its place. They were a tide of monstrous flesh and dark energy, and they were slowly, inexorably pushing the shinobi back. High above the chaos, Kokobeel floated. His 10 black wings spread wide. He watched the battle below with an expression of bored amusement, like a king observing a particularly frantic ant colony. This is our fight, Naruto said, standing beside Xenovia on the roof of the Hokage Tower. The others are just buying us time. Then let us not waste it, Xenovia replied, drawing her Durandal. The blade shone with a clear, determined light, a reflection of its wielder's newfound resolve. They shot forward, leaping from rooftop to rooftop, a blur of orange and blue heading directly for the eye of the storm. They tore through the lesser strays that tried to intercept them, their teamwork a seamless, deadly dance. They met Kokobeel in the air above the village center. He greeted them with a slow, theatrical clap. Bravo, bravo, he called out, his voice dripping with condescension. You chose defiance. How wonderfully predictable. I do so love it when the lambs fight back before the slaughter. Your slaughter ends here, Kokobeel. Naruto yelled, his inert Durandal held in a two-handed grip. Kokobeel just smiled. Let us see. He snapped his fingers. Dozens of spears of light, far larger and more powerful than the ones in the cathedral, materialized around him. With a sweep of his hand, he sent them raining down on Naruto and Xenovia. Now, Xenovia yelled. She planted her feet on the rooftop and raised her sword. A massive, translucent dome of holy energy erupted around them, a perfect, shimmering shield. The light spears slammed into it, creating a deafening cacophony of explosions that shook the entire building. The barrier held, but cracks began to spiderweb across its surface. Naruto, she grunted, the strain evident on her face. Naruto was already moving. Protected by her shield, he poured his chakra into his legs and shot upwards, a rocket aimed at Kokobeel's heart. He swung his sword with all his might. Kokobeel caught the heavy blade on 2 fingers, the impact creating a sonic boom. He didn't even flinch. So very, very weak, he sighed, and with a flick of his wrist, he sent Naruto hurtling back down to the roof, crashing through Xenovia's weakening shield and slamming into the tiles with bone-jarring force. Naruto! Xenovia cried, her barrier shattering. Kokobeel appeared before her in an instant, his hand closing around her throat. He lifted her into the air, her feet kicking uselessly. And you, my little faithless warrior, he sneered. What do you fight for now? The memory of a ghost. He threw her aside like a broken doll. She crashed into the rooftop railing, her Durandal skittering away from her grasp. Naruto pushed himself up, his body bruised and battered, his vision swimming. He saw Xenovia on the ground, struggling for breath. He saw the shinobi below being overwhelmed. He saw Kokobeel, a figure of absolute, arrogant power, preparing to unleash another, even larger attack that would surely wipe out a whole section of the village. Everything that Y had fought for was about to be turned to ash. In that moment of desperation, his promise to Xenovia echoed in his mind. Fight for a reason that's real. His friends, his home, her, it was all real, and he was failing them. A deep, primal roar erupted from the depths of his soul. He reached inward, not to the cold, holy power of the sword, but deeper, to the raging, demonic inferno of the Kyuubi. But this time, it was different. He didn't let the rage consume him. He wasn't begging for a loan of its hateful power. He reached for it with his own will, his own purpose. He grabbed hold of the monstrous chakra and pulled. You are a part of me, he screamed in the depths of his own mind. Your power is my power, and I will use it to protect them. The Kyuubi, for the first time in its long, imprisoned existence, did not fight him. It roared in acknowledgement, and its immense, cataclysmic power flooded into Naruto, not as a poison, but as a fuel source, filtered through the unshakable clarity of his purpose. Kokobeel paused, his attack forgotten. He stared as a shroud of bubbling, crimson chakra erupted around Naruto. It was the familiar cloak of the Jinchuriki, but something was profoundly different. Golden threads of pure, holy energy, drawn from the soul of Durandal, began to weave themselves into the demonic shroud. The malevolent red was tempered by the righteous gold, creating a swirling, chaotic vortex of orange-gold energy that burned with the intensity of a sun. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were no longer blue. They were a burning, slitted gold, a perfect fusion of sage and demon. He reached out, and his Durandal flew into his hand. As his fingers closed around the hilt, the sword ignited. The blade was no longer inert. It was consumed by spiraling, golden-orange flames. A true maelstrom of holy and demonic power, humming with a note of terrible, beautiful harmony. He rose into the air, the very atmosphere crackling around him. For a fleeting second, as his power peaked, he felt a strange, cold sensation brush against the edge of his consciousness, like the tendril of an ancient, cosmic predator drawn to the scent of its prey. It was a vast, hungry darkness, and it felt interested. He blinked, and the sensation was gone, overwhelmed by the inferno raging within him. Kokobeel stared, his arrogant smirk replaced by a look of genuine, greedy awe. Yes, he whispered. Yes, this is it. This is the power that will restart the heavens. He launched his attack, a massive sphere of light that could have leveled the entire mountain. Naruto met it head-on. He didn't try to block it. He swung his flaming maelstrom Durandal. The sword clove the sphere of light in two, the two halves harmlessly impacting the mountainside behind the village. My turn, Naruto said, his voice a layered echo of his own, the Kyuubi's roar, and the sword's song. He vanished. He appeared above Kokobeel, his sword raised. The fallen angel barely had time to bring his own blade of light up to block. The impact sent a shockwave across the sky that shattered every window in the village. The duel that followed was a thing of gods and legends. They were two comets of impossible power, clashing in the skies above Konoha. Every blow shook the heavens, every parry sent arcs of destructive energy lashing down onto the battlefield below, forcing the fighting shinobi to scatter. Xenovia watched from the rooftop. Her breath caught in her throat. She saw Naruto, this impossible boy, going toe-to-toe with a being of immense power she could not have hoped to scratch. And she knew what she had to do. She grabbed her Durandal, her resolve hardening into a diamond point. She wasn't his equal in power, but she was his partner. She poured her own energy into her sword and launched herself back into the fight. She couldn't match Kokobeel's power, but she could harry him, deflect his secondary attacks, and create the openings Naruto needed. She became his shield, her blue-lit blade a constant, annoying presence that Kokobeel could not ignore. "Get away from me, you insignificant gnat," Kokobeel roared, swatting her away with a backhand of pure force. But the distraction was all Naruto needed. While Kokobeel's attention was on Xenovia, he shot in from below, his flaming sword aimed at the fallen angel's back. He swung with every ounce of his newfound power. There was a sound like tearing reality, and a scream of pure, unadulterated agony from Kokobeel. The Maelstrom Durandal carved through his defenses, and with a final, brutal pull, Naruto severed one of his 10 black wings at the root. Kokobeel tumbled from the sky, howling, a rain of black feathers and golden blood following in his wake. He caught himself before he hit the ground, clutching the stump of his shoulder. His face a mask of incandescent rage and disbelief. You dare, you filthy half-breed monster," he shrieked. "You will pay for this. My patrons will hear of this. This is not over." He ripped open a small, unstable portal of darkness and threw himself through it, retreating in a storm of curses and promises of vengeance. As he vanished, the massive portal in the sky wavered and collapsed, and the army of stray devils, their master gone, dissolved into black dust. Silence fell over the battlefield. The shinobi of Konoha stood amidst the wreckage, looking up at the sky, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and utter awe. High above, Naruto's flaming cloak sputtered and died out. The immense power receded, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. He fell, his consciousness fading. Xenovia caught him, her own strength nearly spent, and together they drifted down to the ruined rooftop. He powered down, his eyes returning to their normal ocean blue. He looked out at the smoking, cratered, but blessedly intact village. He looked at Xenovia, who was supporting him, her face smudged with dirt and grime, but her eyes clear and fierce. They had won. The secret was out. The world was bigger and more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined. But standing there, together, amidst the devastation, they were not afraid. They were ready. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Crossroads and Confessions. The silence that followed the storm was more profound than any sound. It was a stillness born of collective exhaustion, a shared, silent breath drawn by a village that had stared into the abyss and survived. On the ruined rooftop of the Hokage Tower, Naruto's world faded to a soft, welcoming black, the immense power he had wielded leaving a void in its wake that his body could only fill with unconsciousness. He slumped forward, a dead weight, and Xenovia, her own strength nearly spent, caught him, her slight frame struggling under his. The air around them shimmered, and Kakashi was there, his expression unreadable as he took Naruto's weight from her. Moments later, Tsunade landed, her footsteps heavy on the cracked tiles. She didn't spare a glance for the devastation around them. Her eyes, the eyes of the world's greatest medical ninja, were fixed on Naruto. Green chakra, warm and potent, enveloped her hands as she immediately began her work, stabilizing his chaotic system. Only when she was sure he was out of immediate danger did she look at Xenovia. The young woman stood her ground, her sword held in a white-knuckled grip, her body bruised, her face a mask of grime and defiance. She met the Hokage's gaze without flinching. For a long moment, the two women simply looked at each other, a silent exchange of understanding passing between them. Then, Tsunade gave a single, curt nod. It wasn't praise, not yet. It was acknowledgement, respect. "Get him to the hospital," Tsunade ordered Kakashi. To the Anbu who had appeared at her side, she said, "Take her to the Jonin guest quarters. Post a guard." She is not to be disturbed. She is a guest of Konoha. Xenovia didn't protest. She allowed herself to be led away, the adrenaline finally leaving her, revealing a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with the battle she had just fought. As she was escorted from the roof, she looked back one last time at Naruto's unconscious form, a complex, eatable emotion flickering in her sapphire eyes. Naruto awoke to the familiar, sterile scent of antiseptic and clean linen. He blinked, the ceiling of the Konoha hospital's private ward slowly coming into focus. He felt hollowed out, drained, but underneath the exhaustion, his chakra was calm, his body slowly knitting itself back together. He's awake. He turned his head. Tsunade was sitting in a chair by his bed, her arms crossed. Her expression stern. Kakashi stood by the window, as always. But they weren't alone. Crowded into the room were the heads of Konoha's major clans and its most senior shinobi, Shikaku Nara, Inoichi Yamanaka, Choza Akamichi, Hiyashi Hyuga, and the aged elders, Homura and Kaharu. The atmosphere in the room was thick with unspoken questions. "Welcome back, Naruto," Tsunade said, her voice softer than he expected. "You gave us quite a scare. And quite a show." Naruto pushed himself up, wincing. "Xenovia, is she?" "She's fine," Kakashi answered before Tsunade could. "Resting. Thanks to both of you. The village is still standing." Hiyashi Hyuga, his pale eyes missing nothing, spoke first, his voice a low, formal baritone. "We have reviewed the preliminary reports. We have seen the evidence with our own eyes. These devils and fallen angels. You are telling us they are real." "It wasn't a question. They are," Naruto said simply, meeting the Hyuga clan head's gaze. "And Kokubile was just one of them. There's a whole world out there we knew nothing about." The revelation settled over the room, a heavy, uncomfortable truth. For generations, the Shinobi world had been defined by the borders of the elemental nations, their conflicts dictated by the flow of chakra and the power of the tailed beasts. Now, that entire worldview had been rendered obsolete. They were no longer the apex predators. They were a single, isolated island in a vast, dark ocean full of leviathans. "This changes everything," Shikaku said, his usual lazy drawl gone, replaced by a sharp, strategic focus. "Our defensive strategies, our intelligence networks, our entire understanding of national security, it's all based on a flawed premise. We've been preparing for land KS while ignoring the dragons in the sky. This power of yours, Naruto," Kaharu, one of the elders, said, her voice thin and sharp. "The fusion of the Nine Tails chakra and this Holy Sword. It is an immense asset. But it is also a liability. You have made this village a target for forces we do not understand." "He also saved this village from those same forces," Kakashi countered, his tone mild but with an underlying edge of steel. "Naruto is not a liability. He is our single greatest advantage in this new conflict." A debate began to swirl around him, the clan heads and elders arguing strategy, risk, and containment. They spoke of him, but not to him, their voices a familiar drone of political calculation. In the past, he would have shouted, demanding they listen, demanding they see him. But the battle had changed him. The weight of what he had done, the power he had wielded, had settled into him, forging a new, quieter confidence. He waited for a lull in the conversation, and then he spoke, his voice calm and clear. Cutting through the debate, "You're all talking about me like I'm a weapon to be pointed or a bomb to be locked away," he said, his gaze sweeping over every person in the room. "You're right. My power did bring this fight to our doorstep. And it's my responsibility to end it." He looked at Tsunade. "Kokubile is gone for now, but he'll be back. And there are others, like him or worse. We can't hide. We can't pretend this isn't our problem. We have to get stronger. We have to learn about this new world, find allies if we can, and be ready for the next attack." He sat up straighter, his voice filled with a conviction that left no room for argument. "I'm not a bomb. I'm a shinobi of the leaf. And I'm going to protect my home. But I can't do it if you're all busy arguing about how to lock me in a cage." The room fell silent. They stared at him, at the boy they had watched grow up, the outcast, the Jinchuriki. They saw not a reckless child, but a young and who had faced a godlike being and emerged victorious, a leader forged in a crucible of holy and demonic fire. Tsunade smiled, a genuine, proud smile. He's right, she said to the council. The old rules no longer apply. It's time we started writing new ones. While Naruto was reshaping his place in Konoha's political landscape, Xenovia was adrift in a sea of silence. The guest quarters she'd been given were clean, spacious, and completely devoid of character. They felt less like a room and more like a pristine, comfortable prison cell. For the first day, she did nothing but sit, staring at the wall. Her mind a maelstrom of broken dogma and terrifying emptiness. On the second day, she began to move. She unstrapped her Durandal and laid it on the low table in the center of the room. She procured a set of polishing cloths and sacred oils. Old habits died hard, and began the methodical, meditative process of cleaning her blade. She had performed this ritual thousands of times. It had always been a form of prayer, a way to commune with the divine power vested in the holy steel. Each stroke was a verse, each gleam a testament to her faith. Now, it was just work. She cleaned the blade not out of reverence, but out of a warrior's pragmatism. This was her tool, her weapon, the only thing in this new, godless world that was truly hers. As she worked, her mind replayed the last few days. The arrogance of Kokabeel, the shattering truth, the sheer, overwhelming despair. And then, Naruto. His quiet, firm voice in the cathedral. His simple, unshakable reason for fighting. Fight for a reason that's real. The thought was an anchor in the storm of her confusion. People, a home, a comrade who saw her not as a holy instrument or a heretic, but as a person. It was a fragile foundation, but it was a foundation nonetheless. She finished cleaning the sword, its surface now a flawless mirror. She looked at her own reflection in the blade, and for the first time, she didn't see a soldier of the church. She saw a woman with tired, sapphire eyes, a stranger she was only just beginning to meet. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. She looked up as Naruto entered, dressed in a fresh set of clothes. Though he still looked pale and tired. "Hey," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "They told me you were here. You okay?" "I am functional," she replied, her voice neutral. It was the best she could offer. He walked into the room, looking around at the sparse furnishings. "Pretty boring place, huh?" "Sorry, our guest accommodations aren't exactly 5-star. She remained silent, watching him. He seemed different, calmer. The loud, boisterous energy was still there, but it was tempered now, banked like the coals of a great fire. He stopped in front of her, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. I came to thank you. For what you did. In the fight, I couldn't have beaten him without you. We were acting as allies to neutralize a common threat," she stated, falling back on her formal, practiced vocabulary. "Yeah, I know," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "But still, thanks." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I also came to talk to you about what's next. For you." She stiffened slightly. "I have not yet decided my course of action." "I know," he said. "Look, Xenovia, the church, they probably think you're a heretic now, right? For working with me, for knowing the truth." She flinched, but didn't deny it. "That is the likely outcome. So you can't go back," he said, his voice soft with an empathy that struck her more deeply than any pity would have. "And you don't have anywhere else to go." He knew, better than anyone, he knew what it felt like to be an outcast, to have no home to return to. He looked her directly in the eye, his expression completely serious. "Stay here," he said. In Konoha. The offer hung in the air between them. It was more than just a place to sleep. It was an invitation, an acceptance. "I am not a shinobi," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I do not belong here." "Neither did I, for a long time," he replied. "Belonging isn't about where you're from. It's about having a place where people are waiting for you to come home. We could use someone like you. Someone strong. Someone who understands the crazy new world we just got dragged into." He offered her a small, genuine smile. "So what do you say? Become a citizen of the Leaf. We'll even get you one of those cool headbands." A strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she was being offered a choice. A home. Not because of her sword, or her mission, or her faith, but because of who she was. She accepted. The days that followed were a period of strange, quiet adjustment. While the Villag leadership dealt with the political and strategic ramifications of their new reality, Naruto and Xenovia focused on the one thing they could control, their power. They spent their days in the rebuilt training ground 7, not as rivals, but as partners. They needed to understand the maelstrom mode that had saved them. Naruto found he couldn't access it at will. It had been born of pure desperation and a perfect, fleeting balance of his internal energies. Recreating that balance was the challenge. Your demonic chakra is chaotic, a raging fire, Xenovia explained, watching him as he struggled to meditate. A bead of sweat tracing its way down his temple. The holy energy of Durandal's soul is ordered, a tranquil sea. You are trying to force them together. You cannot. You must convince them to coexist. Her knowledge of holy energy, stripped of its religious dogma, proved invaluable. She guided him, helping him feel the flow of Durandal's power, teaching him to smooth its edges so it could intertwine with the Kyuubi's chakra instead of clashing with it. Their training became a dance of shared energy. Their sparring sessions were no longer about winning, but about synchronization. Learning to anticipate each other's movements, to feel the ebb and flow of their combined strength. During a break, they sat under the shade of a tree, sharing a simple lunch of rice balls. The easy silence between them was a testament to how far they had come. What was it like? Naruto asked quietly. Before your life in the church. Xenovia was silent for a long moment, staring at the half-eaten rice ball in her hand. It was simple, she said, her voice distant. Everything was black and white. There was God's will, and there was heresy. There was good, and there was evil. My purpose was to be a sword. To strike down the latter in the name of the former. I was raised not to feel, but to obey. Not to question, but to believe. She looked up at him, a flicker of a forgotten life in her eyes. I never had a friend. Companions, partners in arms, yes. But no one I simply talked to. Emotions were a weakness, a distraction from the holy mission. That sounds lonely, Naruto said, his own memories of a solitary childhood rising to the surface. It was, she admitted, the confession a stark, vulnerable thing. But I did not know it, because I had my faith to fill the emptiness. Now, she trailed off, gesturing to the empty space around them. Now you get to fill it with whatever you want, Naruto finished for her. He told her about his own emptiness, about the whispers and the glares. About the crushing loneliness of being the village pariah. He told her about Uruka-sensei, about Team 7, about the slow, difficult process of forging bonds that had become his entire world. He spoke, and she listened. And in his story, she heard the echoes of her own. Two powerful, lonely children, defined by the immense, unwanted burdens they carried, he a demon, she a holy sword. Both of them used as weapons. Both of them yearning for a place to belong. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the training ground. The air grew cool. They sat in a comfortable silence, shared weight of their pasts creating a new, powerful connection between them. He had seen the broken girl beneath the armor of the holy warrior. And she had seen the lonely boy beneath the bravado of the village hero. He looked at her, at the way the setting sun caught the blue of her hair, at the newfound softness in her eyes, a vulnerability she no longer tried to hide from him. He saw not a weapon, not an ally, but just Xenovia. She looked back at him, at the genuine kindness in his ocean blue eyes, a kindness he offered freely, without condition. She saw Naruto. Almost without thinking, he reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. She didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. They had saved each other, in more ways than one. He had given her a reason to fight. She had given him a way to understand the power that could protect it all. They were no longer alone. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was not born of passion, but of a quiet, profound understanding. It was gentle, hesitant, and breathtakingly honest. It was the taste of shared solitude, of a found camaraderie, of two broken halves finding a home in each other. It was a silent promise that whatever new horrors this strange world threw at them, they would face them together. They broke apart slowly, resting their foreheads against each other. He whirled, seeming to fade away until they were the only two people in it. The moment was broken by the sound of a throat being cleared. They sprang apart, their faces flushed, turning to see Kakashi standing at the edge of the clearing. A small, sealed scroll in his hand. He held it up, his visible eye crinkling in a way that suggested a very wide, very amused smile beneath his mask. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice laced with far too much cheerfulness. "But this just arrived for you. It's got a rather unique seal." Naruto took the scroll. It was made of a strange, dark parchment, and it was sealed with a drop of wax bearing a crest he didn't recognize, a stylized G, with bat wings. The moment he touched it, the seal flared with a soft, crimson light and dissolved. The scroll unrolled itself. The writing was elegant, beautiful, and seemed to move like living shadows on the page. He read it aloud, his voice filled with disbelief. "Greetings, Naruto Uzumaki, Xenovia Quarta. On behalf of my brother, Seersex Lucifer, and the whole of the House of Grimoire, I extend our most sincere congratulations on your victory over the traitorous Kokobile. Your actions have averted a great crisis. In recognition of your power and to discuss matters of mutual interest, we would be honored to host you in the underworld for a formal audience." Naruto looked up from the scroll, his eyes wide. He looked at Xenovia, then at Kakashi. The brief, peaceful moment of their newfound connection was over. A new, impossibly complicated chapter had just begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Devil's Bargain. The kiss had been a quiet revelation, a fragile moment of peace suspended between a bloody past and an uncertain future. The arrival of the demonic invitation shattered it completely. Kakashi's feigned cheerfulness did little to dispel the sudden, chilling return to reality. The world was not going to wait for them to figure out their feelings. The consequences of their victory were already knocking at the door. The discussion, or rather the argument, took place in Tsunade's office an hour later. The scroll lay on her desk, its elegant, shadowy script a stark, alien presence amidst familiar clutter of mission reports and sake bottles. "Absolutely not," Tsunade said, her voice final. "You want to walk willingly into the heart of the underworld, into the court of a being who calls himself Lucifer. Have you lost your mind, Naruto?" "Granny Tsunade, we have to go," Naruto countered, his voice steady. He stood before her desk, not as a petulant child, but as a strategic commander arguing his case. Xenovia stood beside him, a silent, supportive presence. "We can't pretend this world doesn't exist anymore. We're blind. We know nothing about their politics, their strength, their intentions. This invitation is a chance to learn. It's a chance to see what we're up against. It is more likely a trap," Homura, one of the village elders, rasped from his seat in the corner. "They will lure you in, assess your power, and then dispose of you. The Jinchuriki is too valuable an asset to risk on a diplomatic whim." Xenovia finally spoke, her voice clear and measured. "Devils are masters of contracts and negotiation. Their society is built on a complex system of rules and hierarchies. A formal invitation from a Satan, the highest authority in their world, is not something they would offer lightly. Nor would they break the rules of hospitality so brazenly. To do so would cause a massive political scandal. It is a risk, yes. But it is a calculated one." She turned to Naruto. "He is right. To refuse the audience would be seen as an insult. It would make us enemies by default. By accepting, we control the narrative." Tsunade looked from Naruto's earnest face to Xenovia's cool, logical one. She saw the synergy between them, the way they complemented each other's arguments. She sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "And what do you think, Kakashi? You've been suspiciously quiet." Kakashi, who had been observing the debate from his usual spot by the window, straightened up. "I think that Naruto and Xenovia have demonstrated that they can handle themselves against incredible odds. I also think that sending our most powerful asset on an away mission without his elite Jonin sensei to keep him out of trouble would be highly irresponsible." He gave Tsunade his signature eye smile. "I'm recommending we accept the invitation, and that I accompany them as a diplomatic envoy and bodyguard." The decision was made. The risk was immense, but the potential reward, knowledge, and perhaps even a powerful, if untrustworthy, ally, was too great to ignore. The scroll provided the instructions. The transport was to be initiated from a place with no connection to human speed. Ritual sites and minimal ambient natural energy. After some searching, a barren, rocky plateau a few miles outside Konoha was chosen. As the appointed time arrived, midnight under a new moon, Naruto UNR. Old a second scroll that had come with the invitation. On it was a complex, crimson magic circle. Following the instructions, he channeled a small amount of his own chakra into it. The circle flared to life, a silent, spinning vortex of red light that bathed the rocky clearing in an infernal glow. A woman's voice, calm and melodic, echoed from the center of the circle. Naruto Uzumaki, Xenovia Quarta, Kakashi Hatake. The House of Grimoire welcomes you. Please step into the circle to begin your transport. Naruto looked at his companions. Kakashi gave a reassuring nod. Xenovia's expression was grim but resolute. Taking a deep breath, Naruto stepped through the shimmering curtain of light. The sensation was profoundly disorienting. There was no sense of movement, only a complete dissolution of reality. For a timeless moment, he was adrift in a sea of color and sound, his physical form feeling as though it had been unraveled into 1,000 threads. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. He stumbled forward, his feet finding solid ground. The air was different. It was warm, heavy, and carried a strange, spicy scent like cinnamon and old parchment. He looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. The sky was not black, but a deep, permanent scarlet, crisscrossed with veins of violet and indigo. There was no sun, no moon, only a soft, ambient light that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. They stood on a perfectly manicured lawn of vibrant green grass, and before them rose a structure that defied the architectural logic of the elemental nations. It was a castle, a sprawling, Gothic mansion of impossible scale, its towers and spires clawing at the crimson sky like the fingers of a skeletal hand. It was beautiful, opulent, and deeply, fundamentally alien. "Welcome," the same melodic voice said. Standing before them was a woman who seemed to have been carved from porcelain and silver. She wore an elegant French maid's uniform, her silver hair was braided immaculately. And her eyes held a calm, intelligent power that spoke of a strength far exceeding that of a simple servant. "I am Graphia Lucifuge, Queen of Searzex Lucifer. It is an honor to receive you." "Queen?" Naruto asked, confused. "It is a title within the peerage system," Xenovia explained in a low voice. "Based on the game of chess. It denotes her as Lord Searzek's most powerful and trusted subordinate." "Thank you for receiving us, Lucifuge-sama," Kakashi said, taking the diplomatic lead with a polite bow. "We are grateful for your lord's invitation." Graphia inclined her head slightly. "Lord Searzex is eager to meet you. Please, follow me." She led them across the lawn and through the colossal main doors of the castle. If the outside was impressive, the inside was breathtaking. The main hall was a cavernous space, its vaulted ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. The floors were polished obsidian, reflecting the light of floating, globe-like chandeliers that burned with a soft, magical flame. Strange, beautiful plants with glowing leaves grew in ornate planters, and the portraits that lined the walls were of stern, handsome men and women with bat-like wings, their EYs seeming to follow them as they walked. Their arrival had not gone unnoticed. Devils of all shapes and sizes, dressed in elegant, aristocratic attire, paused to stare. Their whispers were a low hum in the vast hall. Naruto could feel their eyes on him, their gazes a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and for some, outright hostility. He saw the pointed ears, the occasional flick of a tail, the subtle signs that these were not human. He instinctively moved a little closer to Xenovia, and she, in turn, moved a little closer to him. Graphia led them through a labyrinth of opulent corridors to a pair of ornate doors. Guarded by two heavily armored devils who bowed as they approached. "Lord Searzex is waiting." The doors swung open to reveal a grand audience chamber. At the far end, sitting on a simple yet elegant throne, was a man with handsome features and long, crimson hair that matched the sky outside. He wore a calm, friendly smile, yet the power radiating from him was on a scale Naruto had only ever felt from the Kyuubi itself. This was Searzex Lucifer, one of the four great Satans. Standing beside his throne was a younger girl, also with vibrant crimson hair, his sister, Rias Grimoire. "Welcome, heroes of the Hidden Leaf," Searzex said, his voice warm and charismatic. He rose from his throne and walked towards them, his movements fluid and confident. "I am Seersex Lucifer. I am so pleased you could accept my invitation." "The pleasure is ours, Lucifer-sama," Kakashi said. Seersex gaze fell on Naruto and Xenovia. "You have caused quite a stir in our world. To defeat a Cadre-class fallen angel like Kokobile is no small feat. You have done us all a great service." "He attacked my home," Naruto said simply. "We fought back." "A commendable sentiment," Seersex said with a smile. "And it is precisely that sentiment I wish to discuss with you." He gestured to a set of comfortable chairs that had been arranged in the center of the room. "Please, sit. Let us talk as potential partners." The negotiation began. Seersex was a master of diplomacy. He was charming, reasonable, and eloquent. He spoke of a new era, one where the old enmities could be set aside in the face of new threats. He painted a picture of a mutually beneficial alliance between the underworld and Konoha. Kokobile was a symptom of a larger disease, Seersex explained, his expression turning serious. "There are many factions, even within our own societies, who are unhappy with the current peace. They seek to sow chaos, to reignite old wars. My power, as a Satan, is immense, but it is also bound by politics and law. There are times when my hands are tied, when I cannot act directly without risking a full-scale war." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "This is where you come in. An independent third party, unaffiliated with any of the three factions, but possessing the power to challenge even a Cadre-class entity. With your help, we could quietly extinguish these sparks before they become infernos." Here it was. The offer. Protection, information, resources. The backing of one of the most powerful beings in existence. The price. To become the underworld's secret police. "So you want us to be your hired muscle," Naruto said bluntly, cutting through the diplomatic language. Seersex didn't flinch. "I would prefer the term strategic partners. We would provide you with intel, guidance on threats to your world and ours. In return, you would act on that intelligence when we cannot." It was tempting. Terribly tempting. The security it would offer Konoha was unprecedented. But Naruto remembered his own words to the village council. He would not be a weapon to be pointed. Kakashi subtly cleared his throat, a pre-arranged signal. It was Naruto's turn to speak. "We appreciate the offer, Lucifer-sama," Naruto began, his voice respectful but firm. "And we agree that cooperation is in our best interest. But Konoha is a proud, independent village. We will not become a vassal state. And we will not be anyone's private army." He leaned forward, mirroring Seersex's posture, a move of surprising confidence. "We will agree to an alliance. A partnership of equals. We will share intelligence. We will act on threats that endanger both of our homes. But the decision to act will be ours, and ours alone. We will fight our battles, not yours." A hush fell over the room. To make demands of a Satan was an act of either supreme foolishness or supreme confidence. Rias Gramori looked shocked. Graphia's expression remained impassive, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Seersex stared at Naruto for a long moment. His friendly smile gone, replaced by a look of keen, analytical assessment. Then, slowly, the smile returned, wider and more genuine this time. "Excellent," he said, a soft chuckle in his voice. "I had hoped you would say that. A weapon that cannot think for itself is a poor weapon indeed. A partner who knows their own worth, however, that is something truly valuable." He extended a hand. "Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. We shall have an alliance of equals." Naruto shook his hand, the deal sealed. He felt a palpable sense of relief, but also the immense weight of the new responsibility he had just shouldered. It was at that moment that a new voice, arrogant and grating, cut through the atmosphere of successful diplomacy. "Brother, surely you are not entertaining this foolishness. An alliance with these lower beings." A young man with short blonde hair and a haughty sneer strode into the room, flanked by several women in matching uniforms. He was dressed in extravagant robes and radiated an aura of immense, yet somehow shallow, power. Riser Phoenix. His dismissive gaze swept over Kakashi and Naruto, before landing on Xenovia. He looked her up and down, a lewd, possessive smirk spreading across his face. "Ah, and you've brought a stray church girl with you. She has a fine form." Once we are finished with this charade, perhaps she will be so good as to demonstrate her devotion to a true noble of the underworld. The temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. Xenovia's hand flew to the hilt of her sword, her face a mask of cold fury. Kakashi's hand moved towards his kunai pouch. But Naruto was faster. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply moved. One moment he was sitting in his chair. The next, he was standing directly in front of Riser Phoenix, a single, perfectly formed Rasengan spinning in his palm, its chakra laced with almost invisible threads of golden holy energy. It hummed with a power that made the very air vibrate, a power that Chi was anathema to the arrogant devil before him. He held it an inch from Riser's face. "Apologize," Naruto said, his voice quiet, calm, and more terrifying than any shout. Riser Phoenix, who had boasted of his immortality and his power, was frozen in place. He could feel the destructive potential in the spinning sphere of energy. More than that, he could feel the sliver of holy power mixed within it. A power that would not just wound his body, but could genuinely damage his demonic soul. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by a sudden, primal fear. I, he stammered. "Now," Naruto commanded, the Rasengan flaring slightly brighter. "My apologies," Riser squeaked, taking a stumbling step backward. No offense was intended. Naruto held his gaze for a second longer, then let the Rasengan dissipate, the energy vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. He turned his back on the humiliated Phoenix and walked back to his seat. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds. The room was silent, the assembled devils staring at Naruto with a newfound, profound respect. He hadn't just defeated an opponent, he had asserted his dominance with absolute, effortless control. He had sent a clear message to everyone present. He and his companions were under his protection, and an insult to them was an insult to him, with swift and decisive consequences. Sears X Lucifer watched the exchange, his expression thoughtful. He had seen Naruto's power. Now he had seen his character. From the back of the assembled crowd of nobles, a man dressed in the simple robes of a minor house watched the scene with a twinkle in his eye. He had a charming, roguish smile and an air of mischief about him. He had observed Naruto's negotiation with keen interest, and his display of power with genuine delight. The boy was a fascinating source of chaos, a beautiful wrench in the gears of the world. Naruto, feeling the observer's gaze, glanced over, meeting the man's eyes for a fleeting second. He felt a strange, almost playful energy from him, a feeling of ancient, clever magic that was completely different from the oppressive power of the other devils. The man gave him a subtle, conspiratorial wink before melting back into the crowd. Sears X clapped his hands together, his booming voice breaking the tension. "Well, now that the pleasantries are out of the way, I believe a celebration is in order to commemorate our new alliance." Quote, as the room erupted into polite, if somewhat shaken, applause, Naruto glanced back at the spot where the strange noble had been. He was gone. A feeling of unease lingered. A faint premonition that the greatest threats didn't always announce themselves with wings and fire. Sometimes, they came with a smile and a wink. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Serpent of Ragnarok. The return journey from the underworld was as jarring and instantaneous as the arrival. One moment, they were standing in the opulent, crimson-lit grandeur of the Grimoire Castle, bidding A.F. Ormal farewell to Sears X and a stoic Graphia. The next, they were back on the barren, rocky plateau outside Konoha, the familiar silver light of the moon a comforting balm after the alien sky of the demonic realm. The magic circle on the scroll faded into inert parchment, the portal closing as if it had never been. For a long moment, the three of them stood in silence, the cool night air of their own world a stark, welcome contrast to the heavy, perfumed atmosphere of the underworld. The scent of pine and damp earth replaced cinnamon and magic. It felt like waking from a strange, vivid dream. "Well," Kakashi said, his voice abnormally loud in the sudden quiet. "That was certainly educational." "Educational isn't the word I'd use," Naruto muttered, rolling his shoulders as if trying to rug off the lingering feeling of being watched by 1,000 predatory eyes. "I think I need to take a shower for a week." Despite his words, a new sense of confidence radiated from him. He had walked into the lion's den, negotiated with its king, asserted his dominance, and walked out with a favorable treaty. It was a victory, and he knew it. He glanced at Xenovia, who was staring up at the moon, her expression thoughtful. His decisive, immediate defense of her honor against Riser Phoenix had been a silent, powerful statement, a deed that spoke more than any words of his growing feelings for her. A subtle, unspoken shift had occurred between them. The fragile bond forged in the cathedral had been tempered in the fires of the underworld, emerging stronger. The alliance is a significant strategic advantage, Xenovia said, her voice analytical, though a faint warmth had crept into it. But the devils are not to be trusted. Their society is built on contracts, but they are masters of loopholes and deception. We must remain vigilant. She's right, Kakashi agreed, his visible eye crinkling. Xenovia was impressed by you, Naruto. But that just means he'll be watching you that much more closely. We've gained an ally, but we've also put ourselves on the board of a much larger, more dangerous game. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the dark tree line that marked the path back to the village. Let's get back. Tsunade-sama will be eager to hear our report. They began the trek back to Konoha, moving at an easy pace through the familiar forest. The tension of the underworld slowly bled away, replaced by a comfortable, weary camaraderie. They discussed the events, dissecting Xenovia motives, the arrogance of the Phoenix clan, and the strange, opulent culture of the devils. Naruto found himself thinking about the strange noble with the mischievous eyes, the one who had winked at him. There had been something ancient and powerful about him, a playful, chaotic energy that felt different from the rigid, hierarchical power of the other devils. It was a loose thread, a question mark in his mind, but the immediate concerns of their new alliance pushed the thought to the background. They were about a mile from the village walls, walking through a dense patch of ancient cedar trees, when the world began to unravel. It started subtly. The path beneath Naruto's feet seemed to stretch, the distance to the next tree elongating unnaturally. The chirping of crickets warped, their song slowing down into a low, discordant drone. Kakashi, walking ahead, stopped dead in his tracks. Something's wrong, he said, his hand instantly on his kunai pouch. The air, the natural energy is twisting. Before Naruto could even try to sense it, the world went mad. The straight, towering, cedar trees began to bend and curve like rubber, their branches twisting into interlocking spirals, forming a dense, impenetrable canopy above them. The ground beneath them turned from solid earth into a shimmering, chessboard pattern of black and white tiles that rippled like water. The moon in the sky fractured into 9 identical copies, each one shining with a sickly, green light. What is this? A genjutsu? Naruto yelled, his mind reeling from the sensory overload. No, Xenovia breathed, her eyes wide, her hand gripping the hilt of her Durandal. This isn't an illusion. It's real. Someone is rewriting reality around us. Kakashi's Sharingan spun to life, the tomo swirling as he tried to analyze the phenomenon. She's right. This isn't chakra. It's something else entirely, a form of energy that is actively overriding the laws of our world. Stay close. A laugh, full of theatrical mirth and genuine amusement, echoed through the twisted forest. It was a voice Naruto recognized with a sickening jolt. It was the strange, mischievous noble from Xenovia court. Oh, bravo! The voice boomed, seeming to come from every direction at once. The little exorcist understands. It's so rare to find playthings with a modicum of intelligence. A figure coalesced from the shifting shadows before them. He was no longer in the simple robes of a minor house. He now wore elaborate green and gold clothing that looked like it belonged to royalty from another world. He was handsome, with a sharp, intelligent face and eyes that danced with ancient, clever malice. He leaned on a twisted staff, a roguish, charming smile playing on his lips. I do hope you'll forgive the dramatic flair, he said, giving them a mock bow. But first impressions are so very important, don't you think? You, Naruto growled, pointing at him. You were at the castle. Who are you? The man's smile widened. Ah, so you did notice me. I was beginning to think I'd lost my touch. My name, Little Maelstrom, is Loki. And I must say, it is an absolute pleasure to finally meet the walking, talking paradox that has the whole supernatural world in a tizzy. Xenovia gasped, her face paling. Loki, the Norse god of mischief. The one and only. Loki beamed, clearly delighted by the recognition. It seems the church's educational system isn't entirely filled with dusty old dogma after all. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed. A god. What do you want with us? Want. Loki tapped his chin with a long, elegant finger. That's such a goal-oriented word. I don't want anything in the way a devil wants a soul or an angel wants obedience. I am a scholar, an artist, a connoisseur of chaos, and you, Naruto Uzumaki, are the most chaotic, most beautiful, most exquisitely paradoxical work of art I have seen in millennia. He began to circle them. His movements unnaturally smooth, his feet making no sound on the rippling tiles. The vessel of the nine-tailed demon fox, a being of pure, concentrated hatred. Bonded with the soul of Durandal, a sword of absolute, unwavering holy order. And now, you've learned to tap into the natural energy of the world itself, the calm, balanced power of a sage. He clapped his hands together in delight. Hate, order, and balance, all wrapped up in one loud, orange package. It's a recipe for the most wonderful, world-ending disaster imaginable. It's a key, and I am simply dying to see which lock it fits. We're not your toys, Naruto snarled, creating two shadow clones who immediately charged at Loki from opposite sides. Loki didn't even look at them. He simply waved his staff, and the ground beneath the clones turned to a thick, sticky tar, trapping them before they could even reach him. He then flicked his wrist, and the two clones were grotesquely re-sculpted, their forms twisted into chittering, monstrous parodies of Naruto that then turned and charged at the original. Naruto and Xenovia dispatched the twisted clones with swift, brutal efficiency. The experience was deeply unsettling. You see, Loki said, his voice full of glee. Fun. But that was just the appetizer. Let's begin the experiment proper, shall we? He snapped his fingers. The world dissolved. They were now in a labyrinth of floating, crystalline platforms, suspended in a swirling, star-filled void. Below them was a sheer, endless drop. Above, the 9 green moons watched like the eyes of a hungry reptile. The rules are simple, Loki's voice echoed around them. Find the real me. If you succeed, I might let you go. If you fail, well, let's not spoil the surprise. Dozens of locusts appeared on the surrounding platforms. Each one identical, each one smiling that same infuriating, roguish smile. They all began to chant in an ancient, runic language, and the very air began to hum with a strange, oppressive power. Don't let them finish the spell. Kakashi yelled. Naruto, use your clones to check each one. Xenovia, provide cover. Go. What followed was a battle of wits and perception. Naruto sent a flood of shadow clones leaping across the treacherous platforms, each one attacking a different Loki. Most of the locusts dissolved into green smoke upon being hit. The clones that found a solid one would engage, only for that Loki to use some bizarre, unexpected magic, turning the clone into a flock of crows, or making the platform beneath it crumble away. Xenovia was a blur of motion, her Durandal lashing out with arcs of holy light to destroy magical constructs, serpents made of pure energy, animated stone fists, that Loki summoned to harass them. Her face was a mask of intense concentration, her mind racing to process the alien nature of the Norse magic she was facing. His magic is based on deception and misdirection, she called out, her voice sharp. He's weaving zens of minor illusions to hide a single, powerful spell. The chanting is the key. We have to find the one who is maintaining the core of this reality warp. Easier said than done, Naruto grunted, dodging a bolt of green energy that turned the crystal platform where he'd been standing into a giant, warty toad. Kakashi was trying to direct the chaos. Naruto, try to sense them with sage mode. The real one should have a different energy signature. Naruto closed his eyes, drawing on the natural energy of whatever this place was. He could feel the energy signatures of the Loki illusions, thin and ephemeral. But the real one, his presence was masked, hidden behind a dozen layers of magical static. It was like trying to find a single leaf in a forest during a hurricane. I can't get a lock on him, he said, frustrated. He's hiding himself too well. Then we'll just have to break his whole damn stage. Xenovia declared. Her Durandal began to glow with a fierce, brilliant light. She was gathering her power for a massive, wide-area attack, hoping to disrupt the entire illusion at once. Oh, I don't think so, My dear, a Loki whispered, appearing directly behind her. He had moved without making a sound, without registering on any of their senses. He tapped her on the shoulder with his staff, and a glowing green rune flared to life on her back. Her body seized, locked in place, her massive attack fizzling out. Xenovia, Naruto roared. He charged towards her, but the Loki in front of him just smiled and held up a hand. A wall of solid, unbreachable force slammed into Naruto, sending him flying backward. You're all trying so hard, Loki said, his voice losing some of its playful edge, replaced by a cold, academic curiosity. You're trying to fight a wizard with swords and fists. It's adorable, really, but you're not learning the lesson. He appeared before Kakashi, moving with impossible speed. You, with the clever little eye. You think you see everything. But can you see this? He snapped his fingers in front of Kakashi's face. Kakashi's body went rigid, his Sharingan spinning wildly. He was trapped in a powerful mental illusion, his mind locked in a battle against an enemy that wasn't there. Now, only Naruto was left, facing down the real Loki, who stood beside the paralyzed form of Xenovia. And then there was one, Loki said, his smile returning. Now, little Maelstrom, show me the chaos I came to see. Show me that beautiful, impossible power of yours. Unleash it. Let's see if you can break my world with your rage. He was goading him, trying to force him into the Maelstrom mode. But Naruto, looking at his paralyzed friends, his mind racing, remembered Xenovia's words from their training. You were trying to force them together. He couldn't win with brute force. He had to be smarter. He took a deep breath, and instead of reaching for the Kyuubi's rage, he reached for the calm, quiet center of his sage mode. He let the natural energy flow through him, not to find Loki, but to feel the world Loki had created. He felt the threads of magic that held it all together. It was a complex, beautiful, and deeply unstable tapestry. And he saw the focal point. Not a person, but the rune on Xenovia's back. It was the anchor for Loki's entire spell. He looked at Loki, a slow grin spreading across his face. You're right, fighting a wizard with fists is dumb. He formed a Rasengan in his hand, a small, controlled sphere. But you made one mistake. You brought the fight to my world. And in my world, we have our own kind of magic. He vanished, not with a burst of speed, but with a perfect body flicker jutsu. Loki, expecting a frontal assault, was momentarily surprised. Naruto didn't reappear in front of him. He appeared behind Xenovia. He didn't strike Loki. He slammed the Rasengan directly onto the glowing rune on Xenovia's back. Break, he yelled. The clash of energies was immediate and violent. The ordered, spiraling power of the Rasengan, infused with natural energy, acted like a virus in Loki's magical code. The rune shattered. The effect was instantaneous. The entire crystalline labyrinth shuddered, cracked, and then exploded into a shower of green light. The world snapped back into place. They were back in the cedar forest, the real moon shining down on them, the air once again filled with the normal sounds of the night. Xenovia and Kakashi gasped, freed from their magical prisons. Loki stood a few yards away, looking not angry, but utterly, genuinely impressed. There was a thin trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. The backlash from having his grand spell shattered so forcefully had caused him some minor physical damage. He wiped the blood away with his thumb and chuckled, a deep, appreciative sound. Oh, that was brilliant. Truly, you didn't attack the artist, you destroyed the canvas. I haven't been that surprised in centuries. He gave them a final, dazzling smile. The test is concluded, and the results are simply fascinating. He began to fade, his form turning translucent. You have proven to be far more entertaining than I could have ever hoped. As he vanished, his final words seemed to hang in the cool night air. A chilling, final observation. That chaotic power of yours, it is truly unique. It carries the scent of the primordial. It smells of the void, of the beautiful nothingness that came before creation itself. How delicious. I simply must study this further. And then he was gone. The three of them were left standing in the silent, now mundane forest, the phantom sensation of Loki's warped reality still making their skin crawl. They had won. They had survived. But the victory felt chillingly hollow. They had just been a Tuesday afternoon experiment for a bored god. Naruto looked at his friends. At their exhausted, shaken faces. He then looked towards the distant, glowing lights of Konoha. The safety of those walls, the peace he had fought so hard to protect, suddenly felt more fragile and precarious than ever before. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Vows under a scarlet moon. The return to Konoha was a somber affair. The tale of their encounter with the Norse god of mischief was met not with disbelief, but with a heavy, grim acceptance. The village council listened in stony silence as Kakashi detailed the reality-bending magic. Xenovia explained the mythological context of a being like Loki. And Naruto described the unnerving, casual nature of the threat. It was one thing to face an enemy who wanted to conquer or destroy you. It was another thing entirely. Why to learn that you were little more than a petri dish for the amusement of a bored, ancient deity. The news sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Konoha's leadership, but it also solidified a new reality. Naruto and Xenovia were no longer just powerful assets, they were the village's unwilling ambassadors to a cosmos of terrifying scope. Their experience was now the village's most valuable resource in this strange new world. The debates about containing Naruto's power ceased entirely, replaced by discussions on how best to support and understand it. In the wake of the Underworld Treaty and the encounter with Loki, a strange, fragile peace settled over the Land of Fire. The great powers of the supernatural world seemed to be holding their breath, watching and waiting to see what the walking paradox in Konoha would do next. For the first time in months, there were no invading armies, no divine tests, no demonic invitations. There was only the quiet, steady rhythm of a village healing, adapting, and preparing. This period of peace allowed something to grow between Naruto and Xenovia that the constant crucible of battle had only hinted at. With Tsunade's blessing, Xenovia was granted provisional citizenship and given a small apartment near Naruto's own. They settled into a routine that was both mundane and miraculous. They would spar in the mornings, their training no longer a class but a collaborative effort to understand the volatile harmony of their powers. In the afternoons, they would fulfill their new, shared duty, training the next generation. In Training Ground 3, Hay gathered the members of the former Konoha 11. It was a daunting task. They had to teach shinobi who had been trained their entire lives to fight with chakra how to face enemies who ignored it completely. Forget what you know about overwhelming an opponent with a powerful jutsu, Naruto explained, pacing before the assembled group of his friends. Against enemies like the Strays, and especially beings like Kokobile or Loki. It's about adaptability. Their power source is different. You have to find a new weakness. Xenovia was the perfect counterpoint to his broad strokes enthusiasm. She was the technician, her explanations precise and direct. She would demonstrate how holy energy targeted the very essence of a demonic being, and how a well-placed physical blow could sometimes be more effective than a massive elemental attack against a magically shielded foe. The sessions were a fascinating blend of cultures. Kiba's feral instincts proved surprisingly effective at sniffing out subtle illusions. Shino's insects, which fed on chakra, were useless against demons, but he began developing a new strain that tracked residual magical energy. Shikamaru, as always, was the master strategist, absorbing every piece of information and formulating counters to threats he had never even seen. It's a drag, he'd commented after one particularly grueling session, but the logic is sound. If you can't attack the player, attack the game board, disrupt their magic, break their concentration, change the environment. It's just a more complicated version of shogi. Through it all, Naruto and Xenovia's bond deepened. They ate together at Ichiraku Ramen, where Tsuki, after getting over his shock at seeing Naruto with a beautiful blue-haired woman, had declared them his new favorite couple and given them free toppings. They walked through the village, Xenovia's initial stiff formality slowly melting away under the warmth of Naruto's easygoing nature and the simple, accepting smiles of the villagers, who now looked at him not with fear, but with a deep, abiding respect. She was still blunt, still saw the world in more direct terms than most, which led to moments of unintentional humor. She once told a flustered Hinata that her admiration for Naruto was tactically inefficient, and that she should simply state her intentions directly, a piece of advice that nearly caused the Hyuga heiress to faint. But the village came to appreciate her unwavering honesty, a stark contrast to the layers of deception inherent in the shinobi world. She was a rock, a point of absolute certainty. In a world that had become anything but. For Xenovia, Konoha was a revelation. It was a place where strength was valued, but where bonds were valued more. She saw it in the way Kakashi still visited the memorial stone every day. In the fierce loyalty between Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino, in the very air of the village. It was a community, a family. It was the first true home she had ever known. And at the center of that home was Naruto. One cool evening, after a long day of training and teaching, they sat atop the Hokage monument, their legs dangling over the stone face of the fourth Hokage, a man Naruto now knew was his father. They looked out at the lights of the village, a sea of warmth and life nestled in the dark forest. "I used to come up here all the time when I was a kid," Naruto said quietly. His voice carrying on the gentle breeze. "Especially after I'd messed up. I'd look down at the village, at all the lights, and I'd imagine all the people in their homes, laughing, eating with their families. I was so jealous. I wanted that more than anything." Xenovia listened, her gaze soft. She had learned the full story of his childhood, of the loneliness and the pain he had carried. "I understand," she said, her voice a low murmur. "In the church, we had community. But we did not have family. We were all soldiers, dedicated to a singular cause. Love, personal connection, it was seen as a worldly attachment. A weakness." She looked at her hands. "I never knew what it felt like to have someone waiting for me to come home." Naruto turned to her, his ocean blue eyes serious, full of a depth of emotion that still took her breath away. "I don't want you to ever feel that way again," he said, his voice raw and honest. He didn't have a ring. He didn't have a grand, rehearsed speech. He had only the simple, powerful truth of his feelings. "Xenovia," he began, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing together perfectly. "We're both broken, I guess. You had your faith ripped away, and I had a monster sealed inside me. We were both alone. We were both treated like weapons. But when we're together, I don't feel so broken anymore. You make me stronger. You make me smarter." He gave a small, sheepish grin. "And you make me feel like I'm not alone in all this craziness." He took a deep breath, his heart hammering in his chest. "I don't know what the future is going to throw at us. More gods, more devils. Maybe something worse. But I know I don't want to face it without you. I want to build a life with you, right here. I want to come home to you, every single day." He squeezed her hand, his gaze unwavering. "Marry me, Xenovia. Let's build a home together." Tears welled in Xenovia's eyes, blurring the lights of the village below. They were not tears of sorrow or loss, but of a profound, overwhelming joy. Her entire life had been about duty, about sacrifice for a cause that had turned out to be a lie. He wasn't offering her a mission. He was offering her a life. A reason that was real. A reason that was him. She didn't just say yes. She leaned in and kissed him, a deep, heartfelt kiss filled with all the words she couldn't say. It was an answer, a vow, and a promise, all in one. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, a genuine, brilliant smile gracing her lips for the first time. "Yes, Naruto," she whispered. "I'll marry you." Their wedding was not a grand state affair. It was a small, personal ceremony held in the late afternoon at Training Ground 7, the place where their new lives had, in so many ways, begun. The wooden posts stood as silent witnesses. Their friends were all there. Sakura and Ino had helped Xenovia with her attire, a simple but elegant white dress that stood in stark contrast to her usual dark combat gear. Kakashi stood as Naruto's best man, Iruka-sensei officiating the ceremony with tears in his eyes. The Konoha 11 formed their small, supportive crowd of guests. But they were not the only ones in attendance. On a small hill overlooking the ceremony, a portal of crimson light shimmered open, and Sona Citri, heiress to one of the underworld's great clans, stepped through with her peerage. She did not approach, but simply stood and watched, a gesture of formal acknowledgement from the new allies in the Grimoire faction. It was a stark reminder of the new world they lived in, a wedding of political, as well as personal significance. Iruka spoke of bonds, of the will of fire, and of finding strength in one another. When it was their turn, Naruto and Xenovia faced each other. They drew their Durandals, the twin blades humming softly in the afternoon sun. They did not exchange rings. Instead, they crossed their swords, the holy steel ringing with a clear, perfect note. "I vow to be your shield," Xenovia said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a new faith. "To stand by your side against any darkness. My sword, my life, and my heart are yours. And I vow to be your home," Naruto replied, his voice thick with emotion. "To be the place you always belong. My strength, my dream, and my love are yours." They sheathed their swords in unison. As Iruka pronounced them husband and wife, the clearing erupted in cheers. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a defiant celebration of life and love in a world that had become so dark. The celebration moved to Yakiniku-Q for a feast that evening. Laughter and stories filled the air. For a few precious hours, there were no gods or demons, only friends and family celebrating a new beginning. It was as Naruto was laughing at one of Choji's jokes that the world went cold. It was not a drop in temperature. It was a leaching of all warmth, all joy, from the very atmosphere. The laughter in the restaurant died. Why shinobi in the room was instantly on their feet, their senses screaming in alarm. Outside, the vibrant, scarlet-streaked sunset was blotted out. They rushed into the street, joining the dozens of other shinobi who were staring at the sky. To the east, over the ocean, in the direction of the ruins of Naruto's ancestral homeland, Uzushiogakure, a pillar of pure, silent darkness had erupted into the heavens. It was not smoke or energy in a conventional sense. It was a column of anti-light, a hole in the fabric of reality itself, a beacon of absolute nothingness that seemed to suck the very color from the sky around it. It radiated no heat, no sound, only an oppressive, soul-crushing dread that washed over the entire continent. Naruto cried out, clutching his stomach, a searing pain erupting from his 8 trigrams seal. It felt as though an icy hand had reached inside him and was squeezing the Kyuubi's cage, not with force, but with a cold, malevolent pressure. Beside him, Xenovia gasped, her hand flying to the hilt of her sheathed Durandal. The holy sword was vibrating violently, not with a song of power, but with a high-pitched, terrified shriek, as if it were in the presence of its own conceptual opposite. All across the village, every shinobi with a sensor's ability fell to their knees, clutching their heads in agony. They were being overwhelmed by a presence so vast, so ancient, and so utterly alien that their minds could not process it. Then, the secondary effect began. From distant points all across the elemental nations, the deserts of Suna, the mountains of Kumo, the misty forests of Kiri, faint, pulsing lights of the same oppressive darkness began to glow. Ancient ruins, forgotten temples, and sealed battlefields were answering the call of the great beacon, awakening from a slumber of millennia. The peace was over. The game was over. This was not a test from a bored god or a gambit by a fallen angel. This was an arrival. Naruto, his teeth gritted against the pain, stared at the column of darkness on the horizon, the symbol of the Uzumaki clan on the back of his jacket, feeling colder than ever before. He did not know what was coming, but as he felt the dread emanating from that distant, violated shore, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The age of shinobi was over. The age of survival had just begun. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Shadow of Creation. The joy of the wedding feast evaporated like a phantom, replaced by a cold, primal dread that gripped the entire village. In the streets of Konoha, the laughter died in people's throats, replaced by gasps of terror as every shinobi, every civilian, looked east. The pillar of absolute darkness on the horizon was a silent, screaming testament that their world had irrevocably changed. It was a wound in the sky, a declaration of war from an enemy they could not comprehend. Naruto fell to one knee, a choked cry escaping his lips as the 8 trigrams seal burned with an icy fire. It wasn't the searing heat of the Kyuubi's rage, but a chilling, invasive pressure, as if the very concept of non-existence was trying to unwrite the powerful life force sealed within him. Beside him, Xenovia's hand was clamped on the hilt of her Durandal, the sheathed blade vibrating with a frantic, terrified energy, its holy light suppressed by the overwhelming aura of the void. "What is that thing?" Sakura asked, her voice trembling, her medical training giving her no frame of reference for the wave of pure despair washing over them. "It's a beacon," Xenovia managed to say through gritted teeth, her face pale. "A source. It's calling. Something." As if in answer, a new wave of chaos erupted. Not from the beacon, but from within the village itself. Every sensor nin present, including the highly trained members of the Yamanaka clan, collapsed, screaming and clutching their heads. Inoichi Yamanaka, who had been coordinating the perimeter guard from a nearby communications hub, staggered out, blood trickling from his nose. "Hokage-sama," he yelled, his voice strained. "It's not just the beacon. All across the continent, ancient energy signatures are flaring to life. Places sealed away since BEF, or the founding of the villages, they're all activating." Tsunade's face was a grim mask. The celebration was a distant memory. She was the Hokage, and her village was on the verge of a panic she might not be able to contain. "All Jonin, to the tower, now!" she roared, her voice cutting through the rising tide of fear. "Lock down the village. Get the civilians to the shelters. This is a Code Omega threat." The emergency council convened in the strategy room was the most tense gathering in Konoha's history. The great map of the elemental nations was now covered in glowing red markers, each one indicating a newly awakened dark energy site. A particularly strong one had flared up just a few miles from the village, deep within the forbidden, treacherous confines of the Forest of Death. "The energy is inert," Inoichi reported, a wet cloth pressed to his temple. "It feels like a coiled serpent, vast and powerful but dormant. For now, this is beyond our experience," Shikaku Nara stated, his usual calm replaced by grave urgency. "We are facing an enemy whose nature and capabilities are a complete unknown. To act rashly is to invite disaster." Naruto, who had managed to stabilize the raging conflict within his seal, slammed his hand on the table. "We can't just sit here and wait. That thing, whatever it is connected to the beacon. It's a threat to the village. And what do you propose we do, Naruto?" Hiyashi Hyuga asked, his tone severe. "Send our shinobi to fight a shadow. Our victory against Kokubile nearly leveled the village. We cannot afford another battle of that scale, especially against a foe we cannot even identify." It was Xenovia who provided the cold, hard solution. "We are not equipped to face this alone. But we are no longer alone." She looked directly at Tsunade. "Hokage Dono, it is time to call upon our allies." The decision was a bitter pill for the proud, independent shinobi village to swallow, but the logic was undeniable. A formal, magically encrypted message was sent through the communication scroll Searzex had provided. The request was not for aid, but for information, for an immediate summit to address a threat that transcended their individual factions. They did not have to wait long for a response. But before one could arrive, the world outside their walls began to die. A squad of Anbu led by Yamato had been sent to establish a perimeter around the energy source in the Forest of Death. Their reports, delivered via a shaky, terrified communications link, painted a horrifying picture. The forest itself was changing. Trees were petrifying, turning to black, glassy stone. The air grew cold, and a strange, gray mist that absorbed sound and light was rolling out from the ruins at the forest's center. Then, the communications link went dead. Just as Tsunade was about to dispatch a second unit, a massive, crimson magic circle ignited in the center of the strategy room. From it emerged not a messenger, but the leaders themselves. Searzex Lucifer, his crimson hair a stark contrast to his grim expression, and his queen, Graphia. With him, through a separate, golden portal, came a figure Naruto recognized with a jolt, Irina Shido, Xenovia's former partner. Now dressed in the ornate white and gold robes of a high-ranking angel, her face etched with worry. From a third, purple-tinged circle, came the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, Azazel. His usual roguish smirk completely absent. The sight of the three rival leaders appearing together in the Hokage's office was a historic, world-shaking event that was completel. Why overshadowed by the sheer gravity of the crisis? Searzex, Tsunade said, dispensing with formalities. "What is this?" "It is the end, Hokage Dono," Searzex said, his voice grim. "Or the beginning of it." Azazel, who was looking at a handheld device that was scanning the energy readings, whistled low. "I've only ever seen energy patterns like this in the most forbidden archives. Apocryphal texts, that speak of the era before creation. The age of the primordials." "Erebus," Irina whispered, the name sounding like a curse on her lips. "The Greek primordial of darkness. A sentient void. A being who considers light, life, and creation itself to be a vulgar, fleeting corruption of the perfect, silent peace of non-existence. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of absolute horror. This was not an enemy who sought conquest. This was an enemy who sought erasure. As if on cue, a single, blood-curdling scream echoed from the direction of the forest of death, loud enough to be heard even in the tower. A massive flare of dark energy erupted from the forest, and the dormant signature they had been monitoring roared to life. One of the heralds had emerged. Guy and his team, who had been positioned as the closest rapid response unit, were the first to engage. The report they sent back was a frantic, desperate plea for reinforcements. "It's no good. Taijutsu is barely affecting it. Our attacks are passing right through." Lee's voice yelled over the communicator, punctuated by the sound of explosions. It doesn't even seem to notice us." Naruto, Xenovia, and Kakashi were already moving. They were joined at the village gates by a combined force of Konoha's elite and a sight Naruto never thought he'd see, a cohort of devils in Rimori armor and a squad of angels with wings of brilliant white light. Old enemies, now a united front. The archives say that primordial darkness cannot be destroyed by conventional holy or demonic power, Searsex said to Naruto as they raced towards the forest. "They are two sides of the same coin of creation. But your power, Naruto-kun, it is something else. The fusion of the demonic and the holy, anchored by your own life force, yo. You may be the only one in existence who can permanently damage these things." The weight of the world settled on Naruto's shoulders. He looked at Xenovia, who ran beside him, her face a mask of determination. He was not just Konoha's champion anymore. He was the linchpin in a war for existence itself. They arrived at the edge of the forest of death to a scene of absolute devastation. A great swath of the forest had been turned into a gray, lifeless wasteland. The trees were black statues, the ground was barren ash, and the air was freezing cold. In the center of this dead zone stood the herald. It was a tall, slender, humanoid figure, but it was made of a substance that was not quite solid, not quite shadow. It was a shifting, silent void, a hole in the shape of a man. It had no face, no features, only an oppressive, all-consuming presence. It moved slowly, inexorably, towards the village, its feet making no sound, its every step draining the life from the very earth it touched. Guy, He sixth gate open and burning around him, slammed into the creature with a daytime tiger, an attack that could level a fortress. The massive blast of pressurized air struck the herald dead on, and for a moment, its form was disrupted, scattering like smoke. But then, just as quickly, it reformed, completely unharmed, and continued its silent march. "It is useless," Xenovia said, her Durandal glowing with a blue light that seemed weak and fragile in the face of the encroaching darkness. "We are trying to punch a hole in the ocean. Then we won't punch it," Naruto said, his eyes narrowing. "We'll evaporate it." He turned to the assembled force. "We need to buy time. Hit it with everything you've got. Don't try to destroy it, just slow it down." He and Xenovia took the lead, charging forward. The combined army unleashed a torrent of attacks. Devils launched spheres of destructive energy, angels threw lances of golden light, and shinobi unleashed a storm of elemental jutsu. The barrage was immense, a cataclysm of power that tore the dead forest apart. The herald was engulfed in the explosions, its form repeatedly scattered and dispersed. But it always reformed. It was not being damaged. It was only being delayed. "It's not working," Kakashi yelled, his Reikiri dissipating harmlessly as it passed through the creature's form. "It's not supposed to," Naruto called back. "It's a distraction." Xenovia. Now, Naruto poured his energy into his Durandal, not trying to ignite it, but creating a focused, stable aura of golden light. Xenovia did the same, her blade shining with a brilliant azure. They charged the herald from opposite sides. "Its aura drains life and energy," she analyzed, her mind racing. "But our swords are conduits of pure, conceptual power. They should be able to withstand it." They plunged their swords into the herald's shadowy form. The creature, for the first time, reacted. It stopped its advance, a silent, psychic scream of pain echoing in all their minds. The points where the swords entered its body began to sizzle and dissolve, not into smoke, but into true nothingness. Their swords were the only things that could truly harm it. But it was not enough. The herald's form began to swirl, tendrils of darkness lashing out to wrap around their blades, trying to corrupt and consume them. Naruto, it's too strong. Xenovia grunted, the muscles in her arms straining as she fought against the corrupting influence. We can't destroy it like this. We don't have to. Naruto roared. He closed his eyes, ignoring the chaos, ignoring the lashing tendrils of void. He reached deep inside himself, past the seal, past the Kyuubi's rage, and embraced the perfect, violent harmony he had found once before. He pulled on all of it, the demon, the sage, the holy sword, and his own indomitable will to protect. The maelstrom mode ignited, golden orange chakra exploded around him, a raging vortex of perfectly balanced power. His Durandal became a torch of spiraling, creative fire. The tendrils of darkness that had been trying to corrupt his blade were instantly incinerated. He looked at the herald, and for the first time, he saw it not as a physical being, but as a concept. A statement. I am the end. No, you're not, Naruto thought, his own resolve a burning star against the infinite darkness. He poured his entire being into the sword. Xenovia, feeling the surge of his power, acted as his anchor, her own holy energy forming a protective barrier around them, shielding them from the herald's life-draining aura. She was his shield, allowing the sword to do its work. Naruto let out a final, world-shaking roar and unleashed the full power of the maelstrom. A wave of golden-orange energy erupted from his blade, not a slash or a beam, but an expanding sphere of pure, conceptual creation. It was the opposite of the herald's very nature. It was not light fighting dark. It was existence fighting non-existence. When the maelstrom wave struck the herald, there was no explosion. There was only silence. The herald's form, the silent void, was not scattered or destroyed. It was unwritten. The wave of creative energy simply overwrote the void, filling the nothingness with something. When the light faded, the herald was gone. Erased. Victory. But the cost was immense. Naruto's maelstrom mode sputtered out, and he collapsed to his knees, his body steaming. His chakra reserves completely drained. The united army stared at the spot where the herald had been, a stunned, terrified silence hanging over them. They had won. They had defeated one. But reports were still flooding in. Dozens more were active across the globe. As Naruto knelt there, panting, his vision blurring from exhaustion, a voice echoed in the depths of his mind. It was not a voice of anger or malice. It was ancient, calm, and gentle as a lullaby. You fight so hard, little spark, the voice whispered, a sound that was not a sound, a thought that was not his own. You struggle and you burn, and for what? To preserve a world of pain, of conflict, of loss. A world of fleeting moments that inevitably end in dust. Naruto's eyes went wide, he looked around, but no one else seemed to hear it. The voice was inside him. I offer you a gift, Erebus whispered, his presence a vast, cosmic ocean of tranquility. I offer you peace, a true peace. No more fighting, no more suffering, only a return to the perfect, silent stillness from which all things came. Embrace the void, little spark. Let your beautiful, chaotic energy be the key that unlocks the door to blissful oblivion for all. End the pain. Let all things rest. The voice was not a threat. It was a temptation, a siren song promising an end to the struggle that had defined his entire life. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, it sounded beautiful. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Maelstrom and the End of All Things. The voice of Erebus was a psychic poison, a gentle, reasonable whisper of despair that was more terrifying than any roar. It seeped into the cracks of Naruto's exhausted mind, offering the one thing he had craved for so much of his life, an end to the struggle. For one horrifying second, standing amidst the desolation of the forest of death, the promise of a silent, peaceful nothingness felt like a siren's song. Then, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was firm, grounding, and real. Naruto. Xenovia's voice cut through the mental fog, a sharp, clear note of defiance in the face of the cosmic void. Do not listen to it. Look at me. He lifted his head, his eyes finding hers. In their sapphire depths, he saw not the shattered faith of a lost soldier, but the unshakable resolve of a woman who had found a new reason to fight. He saw their home, their friends, their shared future. He saw something real to hold on to. The voice in his head faded, unable to compete with the tangible, living presence beside him. Kakashi was on his other side, his hand on Naruto's back, a silent, steadying presence. "It's not just a monster," Naruto rasped. His voice raw. "It was talking to me. It wants us to give up. It wants us to agree with it." The implication sent a fresh wave of horror through the assembled eaters who had just arrived at the scene. This was not a war for territory or power. It was a war for the soul of the world, a battle against an enemy whose greatest weapon was a philosophy of utter despair. A global war council was held. Not in a room, but across dimensions. Using a sophisticated communication circle provided by Circex, the leaders of the new, fragile alliance convened. Tsunade and the Shinobi Union. Circex and the Devils. Michael, the leader of the Seraphs, his face a mask of sorrowful determination, appearing as a projection of golden light. Azazel, representing the fallen angels. His expression stripped of all its usual levity. The reports were unanimous and grim. Dozens of heralds were on the move, systematically erasing towns and villages, their advance slow, methodical, and seemingly unstoppable. The combined forces of their worlds were barely able to slow them down. "We cannot win a war of attrition against an enemy that is entropy itself," Michael's voice resonated, full of ancient authority. "Fighting the heralds is like fighting the tide. We can build walls, but the ocean is endless. Then we don't fight the tide," Gaara of the Sand, his face grim, said from his own projection. "We go for the moon that controls it." A single, desperate strategy was forged from the crucible of their despair. It would be a two-front war, a final, all-or-nothing gambit for the fate of their reality. The first front would be the world itself. The Great Shinobi Alliance, the legions of the underworld, the heavenly host, and the Grigori would unite to form a global shield. Their mission was not to win, but to hold the line. They would engage the heralds across the planet, buying time with their lives, a desperate, valiant stand to keep the world from being completely consumed. The second front was the sword. A small, elite strike team would travel to the source of the Blight, the great beacon of darkness swirling over the ruins of Naruto's ancestral homeland, Uzushiogakure. Their mission? To penetrate the vortex, confront the source of the invasion, and sever Erebus's connection to their world. There was no debate over who would lead the strike team. It could only be Naruto and Xenovia. They were the only weapon in any world's arsenal that had proven effective. Kakashi, as their most trusted advisor, would guide them. They were joined by Grafia Lucifuge, whose mastery of spatial magic would be crucial for navigating the corrupted reality, and by a single, powerful Hyuga elder, chosen for the Byakugan's peerless perception. As the allied forces of the world prepared for a battle that would decide history, the small strike team stood on a windswept cliff, looking east. Uzushiogakure, the land of eddies, was no longer on any map. In its place was a swirling, perpetual hurricane of anti-energy, the beacon of vortex that tore at the sky. "This is a one-way trip," Kakashi said, his voice grim. "Every mission is," Naruto replied, sharing a look with Xenovia. It was not a look of fear, but of absolute, shared resolve. Grafia created a portal, a shimmering tear in space that buckled and warped as it fought against the oppressive aura of the beacon. "The reality within is unstable," she warned. "Be prepared for anything." They stepped through, and into the heart of the end. The world on the other side was a nightmare landscape. The sky was a chaotic swirl of black and violet, torn by silent flashes of lightning that revealed impossible geometries. The ground was a shifting plain of black sand that drank the light. In the distance, the central pillar of the beacon rose like a dark, twisted spine, pulsing with a malevolent, silent rhythm. The air was thin, cold, and filled with the constant, persuasive whisper of Erebus, a promise of peace to all who would simply lay down and die. Guarding the path to the central pillar were the elite of Erebus's forces. Not the silent, humanoid heralds, but twisted, monstrous beings of solidified void. Ancient horrors that had been given form. The journey was a desperate, running battle. The Hyuga elder used his Byakugan to navigate the shifting, illusory landscape, calling out warnings as the very ground beneath their feet turned to grasping tendrils of shadow. Kakashi and Grafia fought back to back, a maelstrom of lightning, ice, and spatial displacement, holding off the endless tide of shadow beasts. It was a desperate, harrowing push, but they were the best of their respective worlds. They fought with a synergy born of desperation, each covering the other's weaknesses, their very action bent towards a single goal, getting Naruto and Xenovia to the heart of the storm. Finally, they reached it. At the base of the colossal pillar of darkness was a shimmering, oil-slick tear, in reality, the portal itself. And standing before it, waiting for them as if it had known they were coming all along, was the avatar of Erebus. It was not a monster. It was a perfect, androgynous being of polished obsidian. Its form vaguely humanoid but featureless, its presence so absolute that it seemed to bend the space around it. It did not radiate power. It radiated an absence of power, a complete and total void. "You have come." Its voice echoed not in their ears, but in the deepest parts of their consciousness. It was the same calm, gentle voice from the forest. "You have struggled so valiantly. It is a testament to the beautiful, tragic flaw of life. You cling to your fleeting, painful existence, not understanding the peace you deny yourselves. We're not here for a philosophy lesson," Naruto growled. Igniting his maelstrom Durandal, the golden-orange flame a defiant star in the crushing darkness. The avatar tilted its head. "Are you not? The battle of philosophy is the only one that has ever mattered. Your every action is a scream into the void, asserting your right to exist. I am merely the void asking you, why?" The final battle began. The avatar did not fight with fists or energy blasts. It fought with the power of unmaking. It gestured, and a section of the ground beneath Kakashi simply ceased to be, forcing him to leap to safety. It raised a hand, and Graphia's magical barriers unraveled. Their complex formulas reduced to meaningless static. This was a battle against a fundamental force of the universe. Their support team was instantly outmatched, their every jutsu and spell unwritten before it could even take effect. They were pushed to their absolute limit, their role reduced to a desperate, frantic dance of survival, buying seconds with their genius and skill. "See," the voice of Erebus whispered in Naruto's mind as he dodged a wave of null space that erased a small mountain in the distance. "All things end. Every jutsu fades. Every life burns out. Why prolong the inevitable? Why not embrace the end with dignity? Because the little moments in between, they're worth it." Naruto roared back, charging forward. He clashed with the avatar, and the world shook. It was a battle of pure concepts. Naruto's blade of creative, chaotic life against the avatar's touch of ordered, silent death. The avatar was stronger. For every blow Naruto landed, which left a sizzling, temporary wound on the avatar's form, he would receive a counterattack that threatened to unmake his very being. The maelstrom cloak around him flickered, the holy and demonic energies struggling to maintain their cohesion against the constant pressure of the void. He was losing. "You cannot win," Erebus whispered, its voice laced with something that almost sounded like pity. "I am the inevitable. I am the final truth. You are just a fleeting, beautiful lie." As a tendril of void lashed out, bypassing Naruto's guard and striking his side, he cried out, a portion of his maelstrom cloak dissolving into nothing. He stumbled, his energy wavering. Naruto. Xenovia was there. She stood before him, her own Durandal held in a two-handed grip, its azure light a defiant beacon. She was not trying to attack the avatar. She was planting herself between it and Naruto. "He is not alone," she said, her voice ringing with a conviction more powerful than any prayer she had ever uttered. She looked back at Naruto. Her eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering love. "My life was a lie. I fought for a ghost. But you are real. This life, this home we are building, that is real. And it is worth fighting for." She plunged her sword into the ground. "My faith is not in heaven anymore. It is here. It is in him." A pillar of pure, concentrated holy energy erupted from her, a blinding column of azure light. It was not an attack. It was a shield, a declaration. It was the concept of existence made manifest, a bastion against the encroaching void. The avatar's aura of unmaking smashed against her shield. Unable to penetrate the sheer, absolute certainty of her will, she had become his ultimate shield. Seeing her, feeling the unwavering strength of her conviction, Naruto found his own. Erebus was wrong. The struggle wasn't a flaw. It was the point. The fleeting moments, a shared bowl of ramen, a quiet evening on a stone face, a kiss in the twilight, they weren't meaningless because they ended. They were precious because they ended. He rose to his feet, his wavering maelstrom cloak solidifying, burning brighter and more intensely than ever before. He poured his own chakra, his life, his love for her, into his blade. He let go of the rage of the demon, the coldness of the sage, and the dogma of the holy sword. He embraced the core of his own being, the stubborn, unshakable will of Naruto Uzumaki. He achieved a new state, a perfect, seamless fusion of all his energies. He was no longer a container for disparate powers. He was a singular entity. He was the maelstrom. Impossible, Erebus's voice whispered. A flicker of what might have been surprise in its calm facade. Naruto looked at Xenovia, and she nodded, her entire being focused on maintaining the shield that protected him. He turned to the avatar, and to the shimmering, reality-tearing portal behind it. He knew he couldn't destroy Erebus, but he could lock the door. He charged, no longer a shinobi, but a comet of pure, creative potential. Kakashi, Graphia, and the Hyuga elders saw their opening, the one in a million chance. They unleashed everything they had left in a single, coordinated, desperate attack, not on the avatar, but on the space around it. A final, brilliant distraction. The avatar turned to counter them, and in that instant, Naruto was past it. He did not strike the avatar. He plunged his sword, his entire being, into the heart of the portal. He did not unleash an explosion. He unleashed a genesis. He poured all of his energy, holy, demonic, natural, his own life force, his love for his wife, his belief in his home, into the void. It was an overwhelming, paradoxical torrent of pure, ordered creation. It was the conceptual opposite of Erebus's being. He was not destroying the portal. He was filling it up, overloading it with life. The portal screamed. The fabric of reality groaned as the gateway to the void was filled with the infinite potential of a new beginning. With a final, deafening implosion of light and color, the portal collapsed, severing Erebus's connection to their world with the sound of a closing door that echoed across dimensions. The avatar of Erebus froze, its obsidian form cracking. Without its connection to the void, it was just an empty shell. It crumbled into a pile of black sand, which was then scattered by a wind that was, for the first time, clean. Across the planet, the war ended. The heralds and the shadow beasts dissolved into nothingness. The oppressive darkness receded. The sun broke through the clouds. A collective, global sigh of relief was drawn by every living creature. Weeks later, the world was already beginning to heal. A new alliance, forged in the crucible of an existential war, held strong. The age of shinobi was indeed over. A new age had begun. One of cooperation between worlds that had once been secret from each other. On a newly repaired Hokage monument, two figures stood watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The village below was bustling with the energy of reconstruction, a testament to its unbreakable will. "It's beautiful," Xenovia said, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. "Yeah," Naruto replied, his arm wrapped around her. "It is." They stood in a comfortable silence, no longer a Jinchuriki and an exorcist, no longer a paradox that threatened the world. They were simply Naruto and Xenovia Uzumaki, leaders of a new generation, protectors of a hard-won peace. Their pasts had been defined by the burdens they carried. Their future would be defined by the home they would build together. The struggle was not over. It would never be, but they would face it, not as weapons, but as a family. And in a world of gods and monsters, that was the most powerful magic of all. Chapter 10 End.